Okay, I'm going to call this Plan Commission meeting for December 9th, 2019 to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Zellner.
Here.
Joe Zitzelberger.
Here.
Kristen Runge.
Here.
Brad Zeman.
Here.
Brian Malish.
Here.
Chris Thomas.
Here.
Brian Wallace.
Here. Okay, first item we have is minutes. We have a motion, or does anybody need anything changed?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Chris Thomas,
Second.
second by Kristen Runge. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to address the commission on anything that's not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward. First item on the agenda, under new business discussion, action on a request for a specific implementation plan, approval for Quick Trip LLC to construct a convenience store with fueling canopy and car wash at the southeast corner of County Highway Q and Waterwheel Drive in the Kilkenny Farm subdivision. Kevin?
Yeah, just as introduction, I would say that at the time that the packet went out, staff was not in a position to recommend approval. I think that the Quick Trip applicant has made a number of revisions, and I think you're going to see them tonight. And I think with some additional conditions, we may be in a position that, staff can recommend approval. We certainly would like to take any information from the Plan Commission incorporated or anything from the public. So with that, I would like the applicant to go through their presentation, and then we could follow that up with some staff comments.
Okay. Maybe you can start with your name and so on and so forth. That would help. Thanks.
Troy Malezova, MLEZIVA, real estate manager of Quick Trip, 6 Oak Street, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Thanks for the time this evening, everybody. We're looking to bring a second Quick Trip facility to the village. This one on the Q corridor on the south end, purchasing land from Mr. Meffert, and also a piece of land from Mr. Tierney and his family for the car wash facility. This would be just north of the Boston Pizza facility on Waterwheel and County Trunk Q. As you'll see from the rendering here, this would be the perspective you'd see from the corner of the property. County Trunk Q would be to your right, Waterwheel would be to your left. The facility would face, as we call it, north. So the front door to the store would face towards the fuel pumps. The actual access, there'd be no direct access off Q. There's been some debate about access off of Waterwheel. And then the primary access for the site would be off of the, I'm going to call it the backage road, the shared road that leads to Boston Pizza right now. And off that backage road, there'd be 2 driveways to the facility. One more or less on either side of the fuel canopy. So you'd come in, you'd have 2 driveways off of that backage road. And then on the east side of the backage road is where the car wash facility would be located. So you can kind of see it in the background. You can see it in the background of that image where the car wash facility is located east of the backage road. And the building itself for the car wash should be orientated kind of north and south.
Trying to get there. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. There you go.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So the car wash facility would be located in this area here. Entrance to the car wash would be from this direction. Folks would circulate through the car wash and then head out back again to that shared backage road. You can see at the north end of Boston Pizza's parking lot here. The Quick Trip store in this location. Fueling pumps in this location. Those 2 primary driveways here, and then there's been some debate about could we get access so folks could come in this direction into the pumps, or should they come all the way around in kind of a horseshoe direction. The building itself is a little bit larger than our downtown location. So over the years, our stores have grown a little bit. So the building square footage here would allow us to have a little bigger kitchen area. Our grocery offerings have grown over the years, so we've got a little more in terms of take-home meals, hot food offerings, and a little bit deeper selection on the grocery side. And then also we've got room for a family restroom as well. So we've got ladies' room, men's room, and also the ability for that family restroom if someone comes in as a guest in town and they've got, like my situation, we've got a young daughter, we can use that family restroom. So it's a nice feature that we've got in our newer buildings. The loading zone for the store would be to the east of the building, so this kind of gray shaded area Trash enclosure, we've kind of notched out the corner of the building, so as you look from the south, there'd be a primary brick facade along this wall, and the only opening more or less on that is a gate facing east, so it's kind of really nice and screened. You don't have a standalone dumpster enclosure. The service side of the building, entrance doors are on this side. The front entrance to the building, primary customer entrance faces north, again in this area. And then we've got parking on two facades, one along kind of the County Trunk Q side of the building, and then north on the water wheel side. And then we've got some parking on this side as well, which would be for folks either utilizing the car wash, or we could also have our employees park in that area as well, kind of remote from the store. Vacuum and is the air station in that location as well, I think, Brad? Usually the vacuum is, so the air station is located up in this area as well. As you come out of the car wash, you'd be able to access that area. And then there's also a bypass built in. If there's a day in February everybody wants to wash their car, you don't feel like waiting, you can then bypass the line, and if you needed to use the air station, you could as well. One feature in the site plan we've worked with the Tierney's on is incorporating some of those landscaping elements, fencing and wall structures kind of along that County Trunk Q corridor, kind of continuing the theme that was started along the Boston Pizza site. So you can kind of see that in the rendering image. As Kevin mentioned, we've kind of worked with staff to kind of come up with a plan here that obviously this is kind of a gateway signature intersection in the village. So we've gone back and upgraded our facility from our initial offerings. We've gone through and incorporate some of the stone elements. Maybe, I don't know, Tracy, if you could go back to that rendering image. Incorporating some of the stone elements that were on the field stone walls and elements in the Boston Pizzas building. So we incorporated that stone base along the building on all four facades. And then also took the I guess you call it Fond du Lac stone, or kind of that narrower stone along the corner elements of the building. And then also incorporated that field stone treatment along the base that's in the walls into the canopy columns themselves. What we did with the canopy columns was bring that brick about 9 feet up in terms of height, was our thought. I think we've got that kind of similar in the downtown location in terms of how high up the brick goes on the columns. And again, the idea was to try and see if we could bring that height to tie in with the height on the building and kind of the brick elements you see there as well. Through discussion going back and forth, we offered back the canopy roof element that matches kind of the angle and nature of the roof lines on the store as well. And then we've got kind of 3 gable elements on the building. We've got this front entry here. We've got a side gable element with a transom window, if you will. And we put a little bit of signage in there to say Quick Trip at Kilkenny Farms to kind of mark the place and note where we are in the community and kind of what this development is. And then also there's a 3rd gable element added to the backside. You can't see it from this angle, but will be facing Boston's Pizza. So as you're coming into town from the south to the north, you'd see that gable element as well. Landscaping is obviously along the Q corridor to the north as well, along Water Wheel. And then there's obviously landscaping around the car wash building as well. The facility itself would probably will be a 24/7 facility. We'd have probably in the neighborhood of 35 folks working at the store. Obviously not at one time, but split over different shifts. The investment itself would probably be definitely a multi-million-dollar investment we've been making in the village, and I think with everything in the growth that's going on in your community that we'd like to be a part of it as well. So that were my brief comments. I'd be happy to turn it back to Kevin if there's any specific questions or items or issues to go through.
Yeah, if I could, Chris, I'll just go through some of the higher level staff comments, and I'll have Brian, probably not Brian, but Jason and Ed weigh in as needed, because they're really their comments that we're trying to incorporate. The first one's from Strand, and we certainly recommend removal of that first right-in access point, because it's so close to the alleyway, entranceway. Our transportation engineers are making clear that it just doesn't work there. So that's recommendation number 1, that be removed. Number 2 is regarding the canopy and the roof and the hip roof, and I'm going to let Ed spend a little bit of time talking about that one. Signage in terms of what we've been requiring along this corridor is not to have any type of freestanding signage along the corridor, that all the signage had to be incorporated into the building. And I think there's some direction we need from the Planning Commission on this is the proposed signage on the canopy redundancy to the signage that's on Water Wheel. And I think at the staff level, we prefer just to see the signage along Water Wheel. One, it identifies the price of the gas, which is a requirement, which we understand. In terms of the size, and you can let Jason maybe touch about this, but to make it more of a monument sign and not exceedingly tall along that corridor, but it really gives a point of entranceway into that particular site, identifies to the customers or the drivers that this is the direction they need to get off of Q and onto Water Wheel in order to gain access into the site. And then Ed's got some additional comments regarding some stone walls and integration of the stone base for the pricing sign that would be on Water Wheel. And if you read through the package, you realize that this is an area that was identified in the GDP that would need it to be a high-quality gateway development. It had to be something unique. It had to be over and above what you would see on any other normal particular quick trip spot. So I think we're looking to the Planning Commission, does it get there? And I think that our consultants can weigh in with some feedback that we can support this. So Ed, with that, do you want to talk about the hip roof and the canopy?
Canopies are always a challenge, and by the way, you produce phenomenal facilities, and I support you all the time, so hopefully this is in complement with what you've already established as a reputation. Just feel that the canopy could be reduced in scale twofold. One is if we went with more of a hip configuration on the canopy, it would reduce those end peaks and bring them down. And you've done this at other facilities, and they look really great. And then the other thing is, this is a good illustration. The pipe columns, even though you've clad the base of them, they start looking they're still kind of spindly with that big bonnet up above. So I think you've demonstrated this in some of your other facilities, not just the ones you've inherited, but some that you've designed from scratch, where you carry the masonry up to the ceiling of the canopy. Now, it doesn't have to be straight, it could be tapered to reduce some, but just to create more of a transition, architectural transition. And like you've done in other facilities, pick up some additional materials, and you have done that with the base in the building. So I think the transition of the stone up to the ceiling to reduce the spindliness that you see here. And then I think if you could go with a hip, you'll probably reduce the height of the single ridge that you have now, and it would make the canopy have more of a floating appearance and a reduced scale. Reinforcing what Kevin just said, I think there's a redundancy in the electronic signboard that posts the gas prices when you do have a ground sign. And the other thing is that, especially from this view, it starts almost looking like a pylon sign along Q, which we're trying to avoid. So I think to reduce the duplication of that would be much appreciated. We certainly recommend that from the aesthetic and the design standpoint. The Mefford plan actually had, and I commend you on the continuity and the treatment of the stone walls and the rail fencing along Q. In the Mefford plan that was previously approved, it turned onto Water Wheel, and the ground sign was actually incorporated in the let's see, the other elevation if we could. Yeah, there. So the stone wall turned the corner. I mean, there were openings, but it continued that edge treatment like you have proposed on Q, And then the stone wall was incorporated in a bigger base for your gasoline pricing and your name. So it introduced that, and again, it helped, this is a great view, it helped reduce the visual impact of the asphalt, the shiny bumpers, and so it helped reduce the scale of the facility. It didn't diminish the advertisement or the branding of your facility. It just reduced the visual impact of the asphalt, and it created continuity and more of a gateway going to Waterwheel. And there's a number of gas stations in Madison where you can see how effective that is, you know, out Mineral Point, which is a heavily traveled road, and there's a number of site walls that don't diminish the presence or the brand of the fueling facility, but it reduces the visual impact of the car and the asphalt. What else? Signage, you want to talk about the signage quick?
Yeah, so just, I think the main thing on the signage is the overall square footage. So, we've been counting the signage on the canopy, the signage on the car wash, and the signage on the convenience store as all applying to the total wall signage. And there's a limit of 150 square feet. Right now that all adds up to just under 250 square feet. And so I think taking the signage off the canopy, I think, solves that issue. So I do concur that would prefer to see the signage come off the canopy. The discussion then about where that goes and how the ground signage can be made to work to identify the building and provide for gas prices effectively, I think can be worked out. And I agree that something incorporated into a wall somewhere, maybe we can work something a little closer to Q than back at the driveway, makes sense. Finally, regarding pedestrian access and safety, it was with that in mind that I was in agreement that the right-in access should be eliminated. I think we've already got a sidewalk along Waterwheel in the ground right now that isn't showing up on this illustration, that crosses both that right-in as proposed, but then also the alley. And so trying to cut down those conflict points. And then I'd also mentioned that because there's also a backage road, so to speak, to the north, on the north side of Waterwheel, and we need to provide for some kind of safe crossing between the two. So my recommendation is that be on the east side of that intersection for connectivity in this whole area. So I think that's everything else I wanted to mention.
Are we making any sense?
Yeah, so I guess one question for me is, as far as the signage that you're discussing in terms of rounding that corner that we're seeing here, are you talking that the signage would then be able to face north, or be in the corner facing where we're looking right now, kind of on the 45, so to speak?
So the Medford plan had it as close as we could to Q, outside of the site triangle. And it was double-sided, so you could see it approaching from the south, and you could see it approaching from the north.
So
it'd be
it would be oriented east to west facing.
Correct. So it'd be perpendicular to the traffic flow in your sight lines. That is correct.
So if you go to the next, can you go, Tracy, to the next image? So if you were coming from this direction, the sign would be somewhere, I don't know, say back in.
Approximately, yeah. Yeah, the thing you have to be careful is the site triangle, but you would see it from Q.
As far as the canopy itself and the elements discussed, is there something you could do, maybe short of masonry in here, if there was some type of wrap or something along those column elements?
Yeah, I think a transitional element that picks up, you know, some of the flavor of the main building. It doesn't have to be stone. It could be a tapered metal panel or, you know, cement board or something. Think of the, you know, especially with the hip roof, think of some of the, I don't want to say arts and crafts, but maybe more prairie style, where there's a tapered column that goes with a hip roof. I think something like that would be appropriate, and the transition from the masonry to the ceiling would be entertainable.
Is there anything, Brad, from your perspective on design-wise, that
Well, the only concern about trying to return the masonry wall is currently, we propose to have that masonry wall within the utility easement. And that masonry wall is gonna have to get shifted to out of that easement area in order to return that at the corner and then try to wrap around to the north side of the site. It's still gonna be within that utility easement.
So we'd have to coordinate that, yeah.
So Chris, that really summarizes our staff comments, and we'd be certainly looking for questions by the planning commission.
Perfect. I'm just gonna, Em, you don't bite, do you?
No.
Okay, there's 4 seats up here for those that are standing out there. If you wanna come, there's 4 right up here. You guys wanna come in? Okay. Maybe they think it's the wrong thing, so, okay. Plan commission members, comments or questions, if you have any. Brian?
The items I had were addressed.
Okay, Chris?
You said it was 24/7. Is that the inside the store or just the gas pumps?
the whole facility would be 24/7, yes.
Brad?
How does this store compare to the new stores going up by Quick Trip?
This would be,
And in your percentage-wise, is this be one of your top 10 nicest design stores?
yeah, I would put this there up. Out of all the ones I've worked on, I've been a Quick Trip 10 years, this is gonna be, if not the nicest one we've worked on.
And
Right.
why is that? What
Well, we went through.
stand out?
Yeah, what makes it stand out is we added kind of 3 gable elements to the building. Normally typically we'd have 1 gable element. Sometimes we have 2. This one would have 3. We're mixing in a new custom color for the storefronts and the windows. So instead of our usual aluminum looking storefront, we've got kind of a bronzy auburn, I guess, more bronze look to it that'll tie in well with some of the colors you see out there in those fieldstone elements, a little bit of brown. And obviously, we're bringing in the hip roof canopy, which we don't do very often. And then obviously tying in the fieldstone elements through the building, matching those all the way through with the corner elements. All of that stuff we haven't done on many of our facilities before. It is a unique site. I think it's a site we appreciate its visibility in the community, and I think it'll be a really nice looking store when we're done with it.
And we've had great concern about the entryway and how it's going to be presented, no matter what business it is. And I appreciate you being, open-minded and working with our staff to work through this.
Joe?
No, I think everything's been covered.
Right?
One question on the utility easement scenario there at the corner where we're talking about taking the wall, angling it, working it back. Do we know what utilities are?
I don't think we know.
Impacted.
For the meeting tonight, I think
Yeah.
it'll have to give us enough discretion,
Mhm.
suggest a recommendation, is to give us that discretion to be able to make some adjustments based on some utilities we don't want, obviously we don't want some conflicts.
I like the idea, so. No, that's what the revision is. Not the only thing
Okay.
I did have a question. In the packet, if I'm recalling correctly, there were some concerns about the intensity of the lights. And since this is near residential areas, do you guys feel that that had been addressed?
Yeah, and in fact, I had a discussion with our police chief, because it was really a safety concern.
Okay.
To make sure that it was adequate for your cameras to be able to pick up any activity on the outside without it becoming overbearing. It's substantially less what they originally proposed.
Okay.
And I asked the chief if he thought that the lighting under the main street was sufficient for safety reasons, and he did. And so that would be our recommendation, and I didn't hear any objection from their part that they match that light intensity as the downtown store.
I think we can work with that. We just want it to be bright enough that it's safe and feels comfortable, and that obviously public safety is in support and feels that it's meeting those objectives as well. So,
My only question.
So I'll just say, thanks for your interest in our community first and foremost, and your reinterest, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but for wanting to come back to our community within this. And then I just have a couple of questions, and it's mostly because of your other store. From a parking perspective, I think that's one of our biggest challenges in the downtown location. How many parking spots are there right now? Do you know?
Actually, put me on the spot. I would guess, maybe guess 15.
Okay. Because I'm seeing that you have, it's on here somewhere, I just missed, 28 stalls is what it looks like for everything in here. So I'm trying to compare, because I know that's, your other store is obviously very successful. It's busy all the time. Difficult for parking, for people to get in there. I don't want that same situation to happen here where there's not stuff available for them. With the Boston's right next door, when they have busy times too, I mean, right now that street is full of cars as well. And that won't be allowed at that point. So my other concern is potential flow over from the Boston's folks into this parking lot as a result of that. And I want to make sure that we have you all covered. I mean, that's partly going to be your responsibilities with working with them to make sure that doesn't happen. But do you guys feel that there's sufficient parking at this location? After I ask one more question, which is, how many employees are typically on at any time? If you were at a max
Yeah.
time?
Max time, it's probably 8.
Okay. So there's,
Maybe right at the shift switch, maybe you get to 10. But
okay.
probably 8 would be the max.
So, yeah, in terms of parking spaces, there's 15 around the building plus 2 handicap spots. And then on the other side of the alley next to the car wash, there's another 9. Plus, if, people often leave their cars at the pump to walk in, so those are additional functionally parking spaces. So we were comfortable that there was adequate parking with all that in the mix. Presumably, hopefully, staff will be directed to park near the car wash to open up the spots right next to the building for customers.
Yeah, in the past, we've considered the dispensing area as legitimate parking spaces because people fuel up and then run in and buy whatever they buy, coffee or bread, bananas. So I think those are legitimate parking spaces.
Perfect. Like I said, I was more because your other store. I want to make sure that it's going to flow and we don't have any problems with our customers coming in.
And I think maybe you've got a little different, obviously downtown, you've got, this would be maybe a little bit more commuter oriented than just obviously the downtown store is, so we maybe not have quite as high of pure parking needs, except maybe at peak times, but.
Okay. And then if you can go to the, Tracy, the view from the back of the store coming up Q into town. That one. I would only ask you guys, on the back of that building, you've got the 2 windows. Would it make sense to carry vegetation up to those windows on the backside? Otherwise, we're looking at a back of a building as you're coming into town. I'm just,
I haven't seen the planting plan. I think additional screening would be nice. What this drawing does not do is I'm assuming, and make sure I'm correct, the asphalt and the curve there is Boston Pizza?
Correct.
Yeah. So what this drawing does not show are the new site walls and the vegetation that's in front of Boston Pizza, which would also screen some of that view. It'd soften it.
A long queue.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you wouldn't quite see as much asphalt and lack of vegetation.
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a huge expense to add some vegetation there, but it is an expense nonetheless, but I don't want to have the back of the building is the main look.
Sure, we could look at, I don't know the utility plan itself, if there's anything utility-wise in there, but we could look at that if there's an opportunity to soften that area.
Something to break it up would be helpful,
Yeah.
And then I'm in agreement with you on the canopy with the, it looks like they're toothpicks that are up above it looks great with the stone to the brick, and then, I just don't like that look personally, but that doesn't mean everybody else might not. So, carrying it up, I think, would be good, in some fashion. So those are,
With that, Kristen, I would have a staff recommendation to recommend approval with conditions. Number 1, removal of the right turn, first right turn in, to match the lighting as Main Street. 3, signage is recommended and discussed at the Plan Commission tonight by our staff. Number 4, changes in architecture that were outlined in Ed's memos, as also discussed by the staff at the planning commission meeting tonight. A review of the landscaping plan, so again, the south side of the building. Then number 6 is my typical one, which would be approval of all outstanding staff conditions by the village engineer to his satisfaction. So I think Tracy probably has that as part of the record, and she would go back, so your recommended motion would be to recommend or to approve as recommended by village staff.
So before I do that, I'm going to ask, based on that, what he just described, do you see any concerns on your side for those requested changes from staff at this point?
Yeah, it's just one element in terms of canopy versus building and roof lines and angles and things. This angle here matches the roof line on the building, and that's one element that I know we've kind of, as opposed to confusing roof angles and making them different, is this angle on this roof feature appropriate to match the building? Is where
I think quite often we talk about creating a common vocabulary. In this case, I would prefer to go the hip over the simple ridge with a more of a truncated hip on the ends, and create continuity with the materials on the columns, standing seam roof, and your signage. When you have an industrial agricultural campus, you don't always match all the roof lines. I know in some of your facilities, you do match the roof lines. In this case, I would prefer I'd opt towards a smaller scaled canopy over matching the pitch of the building. And hopefully that would also save you some construction costs with a shallower structure and roof cross-section. So I'd be in favor of the hip versus the taller roof that you're showing here. A shallower hip. And I can, I have a sketch here that I can share, if that'll help.
I guess, is that fair? We can maybe work with Ed and work through the details on exactly what that.
Yeah, that's how
Okay.
that's how my recommendation would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Tracy, you gonna read that back?
I got one other question.
Oh,
Yeah.
Joe's got a question.
Is
Go ahead.
there a bike rack or anything associated anywhere in here?
There is, I think, yes. Short answer, yes, exactly. I think it's on the east side of the building. We try to locate it near maybe that crosswalk that Jason was mentioning, kind of make it a feature we can add in as well, make sure we have it there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Chris, I don't know if Tracy got it all, but I certainly can reiterate, she'll pick it up as part of my notes and then as part of doing the video as needed, but let me just go through it real quickly again. It'd be a recommendation to the joint planning commission was with the conditions, removal of the right turn lane, match the lighting as Main Street, signage as recommended and discussed at planning commission by village staff and consultants. Changes, number 4, changes in architecture is approved by Ed and consistent with discussion at the planning commission meeting. Number 5 was review of the landscaping on the south side of the building. And number 6 was resolve any outstanding issues to the satisfaction of the village engineer.
Okay. You have that motion? Yes, someone.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'm not
motion.
reading it though.
Motion by, so, no, you can say motion, yes, that's good.
Motion
by
as
Ryan
Kevin
Wallace.
and Kevin reiterated, so.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brad Zeman. All right. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you all for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have discussion action on possible referral of Heritage Hills to Waunakee Westport Joint Plan Commission.
I had this, first, Chris, we had a request by the town board that this item that's not in the joint planning area, but it's on certainly on a border town roadway that would be long-term. And they had some comments that they had shared with the village staff, and passed those on to the village board and the planning commission. They understand completely that they don't have any jurisdiction in this area, but they wanted to provide some feedback for your consideration when you're considering approval of this. As part of that, they had asked if you would consider referring this to the Joint Planning Commission for comments, certainly with the understanding that they do not have jurisdiction. It's just just give them the ability to again weigh in on the comments. We've made the applicant aware of it, and I think they're going to be in a position to address those comments tonight as well as tomorrow night if you refer it. I put this on here first because it's, that's it, yeah, I'm done.
What are you asking, if you want to talk about this? Or if we,
Ask if you want to refer it to the Joint Planning Commission.
so we have another municipal that wants to talk about our thing.
Yeah, they've done it on a number of projects that are in the town that are not in the Joint Planning area. The town will refer things to the Joint Planning Commission just because it's on, it's gonna be on a long-term boundary road between the town and the village. And even if we refer it or not refer it, they don't have any jurisdiction. All they can do is comment, and maybe you decide tonight that having their comments already in place in hand is sufficient. Certainly, I think that would be a reasonable position as well.
I mean, how would you guys like to proceed on this? I mean, it's not in the joint plan area, I'm not sure. Do you have some examples of things that we've done like that?
Not off the top of my head, no. Not off the top of my head, but I know there's been several.
Do we think that their comments are gonna be consistent with Tom's memo?
Yes.
Does, okay.
Yes. And I think that's another, it could be a reasonable position to say, okay, we have Tom's memo after a consultation with this town board. Thanks for the comments. We certainly will consider those as we consider approval for this development, and that can be sufficient in not referring.
Okay. So we were gonna give the applicant an opportunity to respond to their stuff
I
tonight?
think they'll probably respond as part on the next agenda item regardless, because with these comments that are out there. I think the question just is, do you want to refer to the Joint Planning Commission or not, or do you think you have sufficient feedback from the town that you don't need feedback from the town, but do you want any more feedback from the town, or is this sufficient?
How is the process gonna work if the committee here approves it and then refers it to the
I don't know,
town?
I think that makes it more complicated, because then, it's probably a timing issue.
I guess we have a position and then approve and refer it to the town, what's the town's input and how is that gonna change anything?
They wouldn't have any jurisdiction, so they couldn't necessarily change any action that you take tonight, other than maybe ask for your reconsideration. I don't know. Because of the timing, and maybe you have enough information. They made the request, I'm passing it along to you, so
We have great relations with Westport. I mean, we don't, I'm just trying to figure out why we would push this back to joint plan when it's really not a joint plan thing. That's how I'm feeling about this, but you guys speak up, I'm not.
We've been asking for the input, it's on a shared road. So I think that was important, so we did get their feedback from the town, and I think at the staff level, we've certainly given consideration to all their comments.
So, based on that, what else, why would we need to send it back again then? We have their comments about the shared road. I'm,
Kind of the same scratching my head, I'm not sure what that does or why. I'm not looking to leave Westport out of it, I
What
want
would
their
be-
input, I feel like we got their input.
yeah, that's,
So
I'm in agreement, that's why I'm trying to figure out what purpose it would be to send it.
You're answering the question fine for me. I mean, if it's a non-referral, you have enough information from town. I think you do. I mean, I'm just,
What was the timing of the request for the referral versus the
I don't have the exact timing. I don't, I think we were, it seemed like we lost a meeting somewhere on the Joint Planning Commission where we could have talked about it sooner, and I think we lost a meeting because of some quorum issues on the joint plan.
Our attorney, do you have anything to say about this?
No, I think Kevin's right. I think as part of your discussion, you may have answered the question. If you feel the town has already provided a significant amount of information, I think to the developer and to Kevin through the memo that's in your packet, I haven't heard anything from the town suggesting that they would go beyond the scope of that memo, and so if at the plan commission level, if you believe that the town's already provided significant input, and because it's not in the joint planning area, if you think that essentially we already have everything we need, then that would support the idea that you wouldn't refer it to the joint planning commission.
So it's not just my decision, correct?
Well, it's
Our decision.
it's a plan commission decision. I mean, I would say this, if the consensus is that you're not going to refer it, then I actually don't think you need to take action. I think if you are going to refer it, then I think you would wanna make a motion.
Okay, so,
Or either way, we could make it concrete by making the motion.
Correct.
okay. So, does anybody want to make a motion one way or another on this?
I'll move to refer it to the Joint Plan Commission.
You want to refer it to them?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a motion made to refer it to the
I can second that.
Brad seconded it, okay? Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Nay.
Nay.
I think Tracy's probably need to vote.
I need a little more than that.
Okay, so then, you can do a roll call vote.
Okay. Chris?
No.
Kristen?
No.
Chris?
Yes.
Brian? Brad?
Other-
Yes.
Brian?
No.
Okay, so it's four.
And
Joe.
Joe?
Yes. Joe made the motion, I assumed you were gonna vote yes. Okay, so it's 4-3, so it passes, so it's going to go back to, okay. Okay, moving on to number 3.
There's a public hearing tonight, Chris, that goes along with this, and you might have Brian talk about some the multifamily and language related to that, and really the action you're taking is only on the, Brian will further explain this, but we're only in a position to recommend approval of the GDP, not the SIP. And then as part of the packet, I tried to outline some issues that I think that were important that I want you to consider as they go through their presentation. Let me just go through those really quickly. That at the staff level, we think it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. The GDP zoning seems appropriate. The Parks Committee did review it and did recommend approval of the proposal, with the caveat though that it does come back for some further analysis of the detailed planning of those park levels. That Division Street be extended. Currently it's included, but there's gotta be some details that need to be worked out. But this is not in phase 1, we can defer that until a later phase. The sewer and water, they appear to work, but we have some future capacity issues. We wanna add some language in the agreement that addresses that issue. State Trunk Highway 19, we're waiting on the TIA results and any necessary improvements with all the intersections with the Main Street, State Trunk Highway 19. We had a request from Waunakee Utilities regarding the 6-foot side backs versus 5-foot side. And then town comments and requests for joint and requests, we've already solved that issue. With that, why don't keep those in mind as we go through the presentation, and then we can give you a staff recommendation after that, after the public hearing.
Presentation first and then the public hearing? Perfect.
Okay. Thanks again for having us tonight. It's good to see everybody again. Just
introduction here.
Let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. I got it. It's
Wow,
the
you're
first
way
slide.
up there.
I've got a dummy slide, so I know how to work the remote. That's the key here. My name's Chris Sellers. I'm with Viridian Homes, and with me tonight is Brian Munson. He's our planner, and Dan Day. Together, they've been working on Viridian projects and master plans over 50 years around Dane County. And frankly, we're very excited to have identified the Briding Family Farm as our next location for our future master plan community. Again, I call it a master plan because it's going to take 10 to 12, 13 years to build this out. It's not all going to pop up overnight. It takes a lot of time to build something like this out, but it also takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort, which we've been meeting with staff and the committees diligently here to work through. Building homes that enrich lives and realize dreams, that's the company philosophy. And it's not just homes, but it's also developments. That's one thing that's unique about Viridian is that we have the ability to not only develop our own land, but build our own houses. And it's through this that we're able to achieve a much more controlled price point on our sales volume or rate of our house and sales prices of our houses. And so it's something that we're very cognizant of here in Waunakee, and I'll touch about here shortly. Housing variety, we want to integrate housing options in both format and price point, build houses that support the many needs of a community, and facilitate housing that meets the residents' changing needs. Again, the timing of this was pretty good. The housing study, and I kind of used that for our roadmap going into this. And the item that really struck me the most was that it stated that there's a desperate need for more housing inventory to fulfill the median, or those people that are earning 80 to 100% of the median income in Waunakee. That 80 to 100% is $78,000 to $98,000 a year annual income for a family in Waunakee. I ran quick numbers with our lender, and at $78,000 a year with 10% down on a house, and assuming that their house payment is 30% of their take-in each month, that means they could afford a $365,000 house. So there's a tremendous lack of inventory currently in Waunakee at that price point. That's something that we want to try and target towards. Just some quick hard numbers. Year to date, there's been 169 closed homes in Waunakee. That doesn't include a lot of new builds because builders don't load their homes into the MLS. Of that 169, 59 were 350,000 or less, and only 29 were under 300,000. The average age of those houses under 300,000 is 50 years old. So right there, it's telling me that there's a huge disparity of houses for first-time young families, entry-level buyers that can no longer afford to live here, or if they can, and they can buy a $300,000 house, it's 50 years old, and it's going to probably take a lot of modifications. Our goal is to deliver a wide variety of housing, a wide variety of price points, but also a good percentage of homes that are under that $300,000 price point. Vibrancy, we blend architectural diversity with people-friendly designs. We create and inherit a sense of community through a mix of uses in housing. We integrate diverse parks, open space, trails to support the entire community. We've had several meetings with the Parks Committee. We presented to the Parks Committee with the Parks Department we've been meeting with, and addressed all the comments and even updated our parks plan tonight to address recent comments that we just received from the committee last week. So again, we're very proud of what we've got planned here. It's a wide variety of parks strategically located throughout the development to cater to all the houses. Sustainability, we respect the natural features and heritage of the land, and we use certified energy efficient designs and environmentally sound practices. We are a green tier builder. We are very cautious and cognizant of our surroundings. We do have some wetland on this site that we've noticed or notified and already want to incorporate as an amenity. We're not asking for park dedication for it, but we intend on building trails around it to enhance the use of it, and to also come up with an annual seeding program to also establish more of a growth pattern within the wetland in this area. So without further ado, that's just kind of the quick overview. I'm going to give it over to Brian, who will kind of run through the different housing mix that we're going to look to build out here.
Well, thank you, Chris. Again, Brian Munson with Vanderwall and Associates. And to walk through the proposal, a couple things in this presentation just to note. One is, I think we've mentioned in the concept presentation, all the photos in this packet are from Viridian neighborhoods. And that's intentional because this is something we've done time and time again. As mentioned, both Dan and I have been working on Viridian neighborhoods for some time now. We do look at these as a master plan community that's based off of experience of implementation, in that we've done these kind of neighborhoods throughout Dane County and south central Wisconsin and are excited to bring it here today. Just to start from, of course, our location, everyone's aware of the Bryan Farm in that as you come in on Main Street from the east, north of the business park, a very prominent property. And so we took that as a challenge as to how we can create a neighborhood that is both fit within the context of the community, but also creates a welcoming gateway. Wrong way. As mentioned previously by staff, this is reflected in the adopted comprehensive plans for residential growth. It was reflected in the plans within the school district, which projected growth in the long term on this site as well. So we're building off of something that you've begun many years ago and trying to now implement into a project. The site itself does have, as noted, our wetlands in the southeast corner. Quite a bit of grade across it, but then also in the northwest corner, some existing trees that we're trying to work into our preservation and creation of our parks. The concept for the entire property, as Chris mentioned, is designed to offer a variety of homes. We see this as a life cycle of housing. We want someone to be able to approach this neighborhood when it's fully built out and have an option for housing regardless of where they are in their needs. And that's everything from attainable first home buyer all the way up through move up, move down, senior, and attached products. So we have a full spectrum of housing within this neighborhood, which creates 318 single family homes, both in carriage lane configuration and conventional front street access. We have twin homes in two different categories, and they're set up deliberately in that they offer both attainable housing in market rate twin homes, but then also senior-focused housing with ranch plans and designs that appeal to potential move-down buyers. We then have accented that with our multifamily homes along Main Street, and then the evaluation of the farm mixed-use center as another diverse option within the neighborhood. From a phasing sense, this will take many years. This is not a simply build it straight out of the box. It will take many years. There will be a lot of discussions with the community as we move forward, ranging from park designs to phase and utility extensions. And so we anticipate, in general terms, starting in the southwest corner and moving across the site and finishing in the northeast corner of the project. These boundaries and kind of given a sense of how large each phase will be, but even those might be broken into smaller segments, or the lines may change as we get into implementation. Again, our target consumer group is really a little bit of everybody. We see this as an opportunity to really diversify the housing choices in this neighborhood, but then within the entire community. And as Chris mentioned, because Viridian will be building each of the homes, we have controls over both floor plans, formats, and price points, but then also construction techniques that shuttle all the way down to when we start to look at landscape and utility easements and placement of garages. Viridian will be embedded in all of those decisions, and so we're confident we'll be able to deliver upon the promises of creating that diverse neighborhood with a variety of housing. Just to talk on some of the components in greater detail. As I mentioned, the twin homes are broken into two different categories. It's kind of a market rate or attainable housing product of about 88 units. So that would be 44 buildings. They're set up to be fee simple. So there'll be a lot line down the middle of the twin home. So there'll be for sale product throughout. Then that is accented with 72 of our Haven series. And again, that is our senior targeted housing. So you see more ranch plans, both in street access and alley access configurations. And so we really span the opportunity for housing choices within just this subset. And you'll see these, as I mentioned, both with carriage lanes in the back. Some sites do have to take up some grades. We have tuck under garages, and then other sites would be completely flat sites so that you would have fewer barriers to entry as you move into the housing product. From a transition point, this area highlights in general are where the market rate homes are, and they kind of form a transition from the next piece being our Haven product, each of which is designed to kind of transition within the neighborhood, but also host off of specific open space features within the concept. And so we're excited to bring this in as part of the project. The next piece is our carriage lane single family. We have 95 units And it's not just one size fits all. Even within the carriage lane and the conventional single family, you'll see a wide range of different housing types and lot sizes that correlate to price point and format throughout. These, again, will offer more diversity and a variety of choices for buyers to match what they're looking for in housing. And different spaces within the neighborhood host off of different features. Another aspect of our carriage homes to point out is the house that you would see on these sites from a living standpoint is almost identical to what you would fit on some of the conventional single-family homes. So effectively, if you think about taking the garage width of a conventional home, about 24 feet, take that off the width of the lot and put it in the back. Now the impacts are, the house has stayed the same, the access is very different, the yard space is different, but it allows us to offer a variety of price points and formats to appeal to different buyer needs and different price points. But the house itself sometimes can be almost an identical floor plan found on a carriage lane lot as you could find on a conventional lot. Again, these form a transition from our attached product in this range. You then have an area to the west and to the east where we've incorporated those single-family homes. The majority of the houses within the project are what we would call conventional single-family, so what you find throughout the community and throughout Dane County of garages facing out to the street. In this case, 222 total units. And much like everything in this project, you see variety. It's not just one size fits all. We span the full spectrum of housing from attainable to move up to luxury throughout this project. We transition from our attached product out to the adjoining neighborhoods so that as we move to the edges, we try to get more comparable house products against the abutting neighborhoods where we can, but also just throughout the neighborhood, you see a wide range of different formats. These are designed intentionally. We have a very careful approach to the architectural design so that whether it's a carriage lane, an attached product, multifamily or single family, all of the architectural features really blend well and work with each other. And that goes all the way down to looking at our garages. In this case, you can see a streetscape from Middleton where the placement of the garage is intentional so that the focus is back on the porch and the housing elements. The garages are recessed from that front facade so that as you look down the street, you see front doors and porches and sidewalks as opposed to garages. The final piece of our project is the last two pieces, which, as mentioned by staff, will require additional approvals as we move forward significantly. And that is our multifamily. We feel this is an important component of offering housing choices, and that this will be designed to fit within the context of the neighborhood as well as the character along Main Street and placement within the community. This is a concept of how it could be oriented, but again, this will come back for an SIP discussion with this body and the community as to how this gets put together. But a couple important components to note. One is, of course, our extension of our trail, a significant buffer along here, and then the note that we're not asking for any yard variation requirements. We see this as being fit into the context of the neighborhood, but really trying to meet the standards of the R5 zoning district as a comparable multifamily district. The last piece of the neighborhood is one that's going to take a little bit of time to incubate, and that is the farm center mixed use. We are currently looking at an option where the buildings that are on site could be reused and adapted to a future use on the site. But in any case, any future buildings that would be added into this site, whether they replace or add to the development of the site, will be inspired by the character of the buildings on site now. And so this is something that will have to come through significant discussion with the community in the future as well in the form of an SIP. The last piece is something we talked with the Parks Commission last week, and that is our park and open space plan, which is an important component because a neighborhood, much like the housing has to fit different needs, we really see the parks as fitting different needs within the context of the neighborhood. And that's why we've designed and dispersed our parks throughout. So we have everything ranging from kind of tot lot, small spaces that are associated with some of the carriage lane single family. We have what we're referring to as kind of our English garden setting next to some of our senior-oriented housing, as well as a place here. We also have a large community park centrally located so that all of the residents have access to an active park space. And then, as we mentioned in the northwest corner, looking at an opportunity to both preserve the tree line that's there, but then accentuate and add to the function and presence of Water Tower Park across Division Street. In terms of dedication, we're required to supply 15.3 acres. This concept actually shows 19.7 acres of just park space. The wetlands, the stormwater, and the open space are separate from those parcels. And so when you look at the entire package of open space, it offers a wide range of both passive and active park space within the neighborhood. We do anticipate developing some theming. We shared this with the Parks Commission at the meeting last week about, again, a nod back to the architectural heritage of the site and the agricultural theme. So we are looking at opportunities to get some different themed playground structures all the way through to our shelter design and design of the landscape into that. A good example of the working relationship we're already really enjoying, this was the plan that was submitted to the Parks Commission for last week's discussion, and this is the revised plan. We heard things like they'd like to see a basketball court, some pickleball courts, a multi-use athletic field. How could that all start to fit in concept? So we went back from this plan and said, okay, let's update it. Let's start to integrate that. And that's something we'll continue to do as we move forward into each of the phases and design the parks in concert with community input. The last piece of our open space is a trail and walking path system. And that is a significant component of this neighborhood. We have both a corridor running east-west through and along Main Street, north-south, continuously from the intersection at Main all the way up to the northeast corner along Schumacher. A central system that goes north-south through the community park and then loops back through the park to Water Tower Park, and then a few on-street routes that will serve as important connection points through the neighborhood as well. This, of course, would be accented by sidewalks along each side of every street, and the net result is you create a very rich pedestrian and bike environment, both for our future residents as well as connecting the community as a whole. The last piece is stormwater management. As Chris mentioned, as a green tier applicant, we take that very seriously, so we're working very closely to look at how the stormwater management can both create open spaces that are enjoyable. There's a shot from a restoration in Smith's Crossing to where a stormwater pond doesn't have to look like a square stormwater detention basin, but could have some natural function as well. And so we anticipate working closely with the community on the design of those as we move forward. The last piece is that this is a multi-step request. We understand that this is the preliminary plat and the GDP stage. We will be moving forward with final platting and SIP for the majority of the site, which would be the single family and the attached housing product. And then the discussions around the farm center mixed use and the multifamily will be allowed to catch up with further discussions at the community level so that we move through this in a deliberate fashion. And we do anticipate that there'll be multiple final plats submitted as we go through this on a phase-by-phase basis. So that is the overview. We're happy to answer questions. I'm sure if you want to take them now or whether you'd like to take public comment, and we can address those later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then we're going to open up the public hearing, and limit is 3 minutes on your comments. I have any other persons, any other forms that need to be turned in? Okay. The forms are right over there. So please turn those in if you'd like to speak. And we're opening the public hearing at 7:05. So the first person is Sam Kaufman, 908 Turnberry Drive, South. Would like to speak?
Yeah, Sam Kaufman, 908 Turnberry Drive. That north extension of Division Street seems really close to that sledding hill. Will that be able to continue operating? Thank you.
Okay. Chris, Ellen?
Oh.
Did you want to talk?
What
would you like?
Do we go back and forth, or do we just?
Say what? We'll summarize at the end, yeah.
Oh, that's
We'll do that and summarize at the end. So, okay, so I'm assuming, do you guys don't want to speak before, or do you want to speak before?
Well, wait, we can.
You guys, I mean, you're saying you're supporting, do you need to say anything, or? At this point for you guys? Okay,
Yep.
all right.
We just wanted to make sure to get on the record.
All right, got it, all right. So, okay, so we can go to those. Nyla Fry, 404 East Verline Avenue. Would like to speak.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Broyden family and Viridian for looking at the Housing Task Force results and using that to implement your project or what you propose to do. This is pertaining to Water Tower Hill. Since 1977, there have been 3 hard-won battles to keep Water Tower Hill what it is, a sledding hill. Citizens have not only fought Village Hall, we have also invested sweat with planting trees and doing what is needed to be done to keep the hill open for year-round activity as well as winter fun. Waunakee doesn't need a sledding hill turned into a traffic nightmare due to flying up a hill with a downhill thrill. I guess what I'm saying is I would like to see something where instead of just going right up and over the hill, that you go around the trees and do something that makes it possible to utilize the existing trees. Trees are valuable. That will create a very nice park space, walking space, etc. We need to use what's there and not do things that will inevitably result in losing the hill. Other communities have tried to put a road through really close to a hill, and the hill ends up closing anyway. I cannot tell you what municipalities is, but I have seen it on the news before. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Robert McPherson, 1703 Alexandra Court. In support, would like to speak.
So, first off, I'm sure that they'll work to work on that hill, I think, after that public feedback, so that's good. I had a few comments. One is I had somebody reach out to me actually from the school district about some of the comments that were in the PUD packet that talked about the future use of this area doesn't actually match what's publicly available. And they wanted it expressed that after speaking with administration that they had found out that it is supposed to be in the long-range plan, but if you go out and look on the internet right now, it looks like it's not in the community district's long-range plan, so good. And then I had a couple of questions. One is there was a lot of talk about senior housing. Is there any plan to have any of these Haven properties be deed restricted for senior housing? Since there could be some concerns about people holding it and renting it to seniors at above market rates. Nothing really stopping that as far as I could tell unless there was a deed restriction. And then finally, to address the Plan Commission, you've heard me talk about PUDs before and making sure that the community is getting something out of it. I feel in this case that the community is getting something out of it. The developer has expressed an intent that they want to use the PUD so that they can provide some 80 to 100% average median income for Dane County houses, fully in support of that. Do I think that as a public citizen or private citizen that's going to solve our housing problem? No, but it is definitely a step in the right direction so that we can start seeing, that it is possible to build those types of houses in this community and that they would be accepted by the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Kurt Breinig, 6210 Schumacher Road. In support, would like to speak.
Kurt Breinig. I really have very little to say now, basically because I really appreciate the support from the community. This means a lot to me, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's what I have for everybody. Anyone else that? Okay, then
I'm confused about the plans for
Can you say your name, please?
Judy Homry.
Judy Homry, okay.
Right. The sledding hill up there, that has been, I have been on the village board, I have been on parks, and every segment we're in, we get into a discussion about the sledding hill. I do know, and I didn't write anything up on this because I didn't know this was gonna be brought up, but that sledding hill used to be the dump. There's not much that can be done. Some people have wanted to take that hill down, put the road through it. That used to be the dump. And when I was on the board, some of the, I don't know if that was you, Kevin, or the engineer before you, did a soil boring up there and said they couldn't find anything that would be from a dump. Well, I know that there's a part of an airplane up there, and I know that there's a refrigerator up there. I also know that when that property north of there was developed, it was full of big boulders. And they were all just hauled up on the hill and left. So I don't know if you ever got into anything about trying to change the trajectory of that hill, what it would be run into. I think it would be a rather expensive thing. Sledding Hill, I think, is tremendous. We live on Division Street, and all winter long, we've got kids walking up there with sleds and stuff, and I just know that's a very important part of the park system.
Thank you.
Mary Heiberger, 306 West 3rd Street. I'd just like to thank the Brunicks for looking at the Housing Task Force as having been a member of it, and the plans that you have are wonderful. I do share my sentiment on the sledding hill and would like to make sure that that is kept intact. And I've also seen many comments about it having been a dump in the past. I don't know what's really buried under there. I've heard also about an airplane and other things. So I'm hoping that there's due diligence before anything is dug up and we have a mess to deal with as far as EPA issues. But I love your plan, and just to have the attainable housing in it is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Cindy Cubs at 816 Lexington. Only question I have, we have very large trees in our backyard. Those, I believe, on our property, those are not going to be affected, is the question, my husband and I. They will not be
Where's that
removed.
at?
816 Lexington. So it breaks the two farmlands. Where our lot is half Ryan
Is you west
and
of
half the
Capitol,
other
or
guy.
you, which one are you, west of Capitol?
Yes, that would be east, because the park is, yeah.
I mean,
So-
I could answer that, Dan.
Yeah.
There aren't any trees on our, any large trees
So
on
those
our
trees are-
property line.
okay.
Yeah, so they
Okay.
would be, any large trees would be
Are ours.
on your property.
Okay, so.
Okay.
Just have a quick question. Tim Taylor, 812 Lexington Drive. My question is in regards, and I was a little late tonight, so if this was already covered, I apologize. My question is in regards to Capitol Drive. Does that become a through road, or does it continue to be a dead end in that spot? That's the question I have about that. Because it looks like in the plan that it, you know, the road's still stopping, there's a division there, and I just was curious as to whether that's gonna be a through road or not.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna close the public hearing at 7:14. Do we wanna address questions first? I think that would make sense.
I think so too, and in fact, that even asked the developer to answer a couple of these. We're just trying to get through them one at a time here. The sledding hill, it certainly is something that they really want to touch on. We've made it clear that keeping the sledding hill is important, and that any roadway design is going to have to accommodate it. We don't think we have that level of detail that's been completed yet. We'd ask that we defer the details on the Division Street extension and the sledding hill until we have more time in order to address to make sure the sledding hill stays functioning. Probably piggybacking on what Nyla said, and I like curved streets, just because I'm an engineer doesn't think everything has to go straight, but curved streets are nice. Our snowplow drivers do not like steep roadways that are straight. They're problematic. So if we do have Division Street to go extended at those particular grades, and we do have other roadways that are actually steeper than what's being proposed here within the village up in that same neighborhood, that function, you know, when they, as an example, when they plow a street that's this steep, they have to plow it. First they salt it, driving backwards up the hill, and then they'll drive back down, plowing it. And for them, if it was a curved street, it would be very problematic for a snowplow driver. See here, Setting Hill, Housing Task Force.
Senior housing.
The senior housing, deed restrictions, I'm gonna defer to you guys for that one, and you might wanna touch on the sledding hill. Got Kurt's comment. And Judy, good to see you, and yes, I've heard about the dump, and, I've never, you know, certainly I've heard the rumors, never heard the airplane one until recently, I think this week, but certainly about the dump on the area. I heard the rumors, and certainly about that corner. I can tell you when we did, I guess in 25 years since I've been here, we have extended a water main, you know, down Division Street, and did some excavation, you know, 6 feet or more which we never encountered any type of dump, but maybe Kurt or the developer can address that one. And I think the trees and Capitol Drive, they probably can answer those as well.
Good evening, my name is Dan Day from D'Onofrio Kaki. I'll try to answer a couple of those questions about division. So division on what we're talking about is right here from Verleen up to the existing stub of division there on the north end. Our original plans didn't show that street, but in conversations with staff, it became abundantly clear. And when we were here at Plan Commission in August, I think it was pretty well straight that this connection wants to be made. We've done a preliminary design on it so far that shows that it going straight through. What we need to do is work with staff and not just Kevin, but also the utilities, make sure that where the water main is at and that sort of thing, that maybe that can be adjusted to some of your suggestions of going slightly east with it and trying to get around, save some of those trees and make sure we save the sledding hill, because we do know that that's a vital importance. That was made clear at the Park Commission meeting the other night too. So that's heard loud and clear. I think what really helps us is a little bit of time on our side with this, because as we said, our first phase, and what Brian was saying is our first phase is in the southwest corner, and that's where we're really going to concentrate our efforts here in the near term and have a final plat come forward. If this gets approved for the preliminary plat, and we'd be concentrating in this zone right here, and then we can work on those plans for the extension to division per the village's desire, but obviously to make that work to maintain that sledding hill. And what we've looked at from a design standpoint is division would be above the sledding hill, so you wouldn't have any runouts of the sledding hill onto division. So that would be a key design factor, but those are the things that we really need to look at as we get into the nitty-gritty of that design of it, to make sure that sledding hill maintains, because obviously we understand that's a high community importance to be able to do that. Lexington, so right now, Capitol Drive, was the question about Lexington or Capitol Drive stuff? Capitol Drive, okay. So Capitol Drive is just stuff between the houses here right now, and it's just a dead end at the plat line. That will be extended into the neighborhood 2 blocks to Verleen. So it will come to Verleen into this portion of Verleen, which goes across the site from west all the way to the east over to Schumacher. So it will be extended 2 blocks into the neighborhood and make a connection through there. I think we need to talk about the senior housing.
Can you explain why you can't connect division to Capitol?
Was somebody asking about bending division this way?
No,
it was just, I think it was just moving it this way a little bit, just trying to save some of the trees.
Okay, and then the other thing, just furthermore, our park design, we didn't show the slide tonight, but we actually, our park initial design for this is set up kind of to complement what's there today. So here we've got the sledding hill, and we're conceptually looking at putting in a warming house, parking lot for the sledding hill path, and then utilizing this retention area and turning into a skating pond in the winter. So we want to maximize this unique park and into kind of being a winter park specifically for this. But again, we have a few years to figure out how this thing's going to connect. So it's a work in progress.
I'm sorry, I'm just worried about the safety of kids at the Water Tower Park going to the awesome sounding park if they're needing to cross the street.
Right, and that's something we'll have to figure out. So
definitely in the plans to do some sort of enhanced crossing there for a pedestrian crossing. What that means is, we'll have to look at what the grade of the roadway is and everything, how it works out the best.
So question, so there is not on your plans, there is not a path parallel with Lexington going to the park? Way up? Yep.
There is.
So
coming
that
up
is a path.
This red line would be a path extension from
That is a path,
the park
okay.
up to Capitol. And then there's, the park itself also comes all the way through to Capitol with an opening behind the lot. So those lots don't butt right back to the rear lot line. West of Capitol, there's gonna be this park extension. So if you look at where the tree line is, kind of conceptually now, and extend it all the way out to where Capitol would come south, there'll be a park opening at that point along the back of those
Got it.
lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will be on our property.
Yes.
To the south of that, of the properties along Lexington.
the question Robert had on the senior housing, the Haven series we call it here, clicker isn't working, but anywhere in the blue, is specifically where that's called out, and what it is it's, we haven't defined quite yet what the age variance is. This is a newer product we've just rolled out on the west side and in Sun Prairie, and right now we're really targeting a 50 and older buyer demographic, but we want to wait and see what exactly that age range will end up being. We do offer, they have an additional HOA fee that they pay into that then covers all full maintenance of all yard care, snow removal, and landscaping, as well as interior services such as replacement of filters and rock salt and everything else that's needed in the house as well. They are fee simple units. They'll be for sale. They're not set up to be rented, and we have a very strict CC&R governing docs. In there, we've even now molded or modeled pages that really reduce the ability to rent something like that out, specifically from what Town of Westport's been going through, and we've been watching from afar, making sure that we're jumping out ahead of this. So we have, they don't become into or succumb to vacation by or rentals by owner or anything like that. We're really strict in how we mandate that and how we regulate the ability for those units to be rented per se. Now, it doesn't say that they couldn't be rented long-term. Sometimes snowbirds like to rent them off-season, but in order to do that, they have to file an application with Veridian, and we can dictate how much of that would be allowed in there.
I'll ask the group right now that was asking the questions, did anything not get answered that you guys were looking for? Just want to make sure they answered everything.
I mean, I was when I was talking about rental, I was talking more of somebody like a property management company buying the units since they were lower rate. If there was no restriction in place for that, what was?
Yeah, we won't. We control, because we are the builder developer. We also control who we sell to, and so we'll limit. We don't want it to turn into a big investment property or something where one person would come in and buy up all the units and rent out the block. We would cut that off and only sell one or maybe two at a.
Okay.
Okay, everybody? Okay. Brian, comments?
I can wait.
You can wait? I closed it. Didn't I? I think I did.
Yes, you've closed the public hearing.
one at 7:14.
Yeah. Brett?
Appreciate the mix and the hard work and focus you had with our study and what we did here at the village, and trying to hit these price points with the senior housing and family housing up through. Multifamily being the first phase, kind of brings a little bit of alarm to me. How do you create that buffer? If it's gonna be a 10 to 15-year project and sitting for the first 3-4 years with a large multifamily in front, how do we kind of create that?
I don't think that's the
I
intent.
don't think that multifamily is gonna get you the first.
Can we jump in?
Nice answer that. Sorry.
Yes, you may respond. Just to make sure it's clear.
We are not the multifamily builder. We are only building the single family. We are developing the multifamily site, and we will work with an outside to developer. It could be either senior housing or apartments, but it's something that's not going to be the first thing that's built. We are specifically focusing on the housing first, and right now we have it budgeted to sell the multifamily site in 2021, I believe, and then go from there. So we're talking probably 2 years out before that. So we want a good marketing trail that comes into our neighborhood that shows a single family first. We're not going to do anything to disrupt that view by slamming home a multifamily project right away. We're going to take our time with that and work with
Kevin, why don't you show to Brad where that first phase is really? It's not the multifamily.
The phase, yeah.
The phase map did show it in there, but it's gonna be just because we're doing some of the improvements along.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that really that phase line there that includes the multifamily is because we've got so much utility extension, stormwater management components that go along with it, that the site may be delivered as part of the phase one, but that, as Chris mentioned, the intent will be that it is done, there we go. That this component of it would be graded and available, but it's gonna take some time and delivered to market in a 2 to 3 year range.
Thank you. Okay,
The other,
are you ready to speak now?
no? Well, the other, those were those twins, right?
Yes, these houses along here are the twins that form a transition between the two up into the neighborhood.
Brian? Anything?
And the numbers don't represent yours.
I don't know that I have any more specific questions about the site proper. I've questions about off-site and traffic and where is the traffic going? What does that mean from an improvement standpoint, be it Schumacher, be it Division? So eventually a lot of households that, I mean, right now I don't know that we can bank on much more than maybe a right in, right out on the south center portion of the property. So I'm assuming all the cars are gonna be heading east, west, and then down to lights at either Division in Maine or Schumacher in Maine. And just from I don't know, when does a traffic study kind of occur, and how do you foresee that being impacted?
So, just to give you an update on the traffic study part of this, we have retained KL Engineering to do the traffic study for us. They just last week finally received the traffic projections from the DOT, so they're starting to crunch those numbers right now. And then we will be probably by the end of the year filing the TIA with the DOT and the village to be able to review that. So I think that's some breaking news for you too, Ketman, on the timing of that, because we have met with the DOT earlier this year. I think you're correct in thinking this is just going to be a right in, right out. That's what we are asking for from the DOT, and we're just trying to get the data behind it to support that right now. Obviously, the TIA will also address these two intersections here and making sure that, because they're undercapacitated currently, and so what we would be adding to them, how that needs to be handled so that it has proper traffic flow for that, for those circumstances. So yes, we are working on that, and it's certainly something that's high on the radar, because we know that obviously this is not going to change until we make a connection out there. So that's but we're definitely getting ahead of that right now.
Okay. Anything else, Brian?
No, I don't think so.
Chris?
Parking for the parks. Is there parking up there for that big park or any of the smaller parks?
So, the parks are all kind of scaled to the surroundings. So some of the parks would be more focused at sub-level neighborhood use, so kind of tot lots, kind of the walk-in approach. So some of the smaller pocket parks do not have anything other than on-street parking, because the intent really is these are serving the neighborhood residents. They're going to be walking 1 to 2 blocks with smaller children. We'd see playground structures that would be targeted towards tot lot scale kind of uses in there. The northwest corner, we do show a parking lot on it because we recognize that could both serve the sledding hill as well as that park. The community park, we show on-street parking, which has been something that's been done in some of the other parks within the community. But we're open to discussion with the Parks Commission about how many and making sure that we match up the program so that we're, supplying enough parks so that if there's a soccer game going on and people are driving in, I've got kids that I haul around the community to get to various games, so I know that crossover, what that looks like. But this would have some kind of dedicated parking associated with it. One thing we didn't mention in the southeast corner is we're actually also proposing a dog park that would be open for anyone. All these parks would be designed for anyone to use. But we do show a small parking lot potentially coming off of Schumacher to serve that, given that folks would want to drive to it from the surrounding community and bring their pets to use that space as well. So as we move into the design phase for all of these parks, that's something we'll look closely and have conversations with the community. But as in general terms, the larger scale parks, so kind of these three here, here, and here, would have some kind of parking component delivered with them. And then the smaller neighborhood greens would have on-street parking.
I'm guessing there's got to be a need for some sort of corral for the mail.
Oh, yes.
Do you know where that's going to be located?
Our favorite subject, yes. We've had a crash course in CBUs, as the mail service still calls them, in that we, like everyone else, have to coordinate that. And so we've looked very closely. We will have cluster mailboxes distributed throughout the neighborhood. We try to balance size and distance traveled. So we anticipate within each phase, we may have 3 or 4 different clusters so that we don't want one bank that has a de facto post office with 300 mailboxes, but we try to break them down into small pieces so that people don't have to go very far to get their mail. From there, we will look at locations like at the end of an alley where people could then come in, and it's convenient for these residents to get their mail as they're going in and out of their houses. Where we abut open space, we will create an outlot because that outlot will be owned and maintained by the HOA. We don't put any of these cluster boxes in any public setting that would defer maintenance off to the community because we want the HOA to take care of that, to own it. It's just easier to manage that over time. We've had to live with the crossover from when folks had mailboxes to when they have CBUs, so thankfully this is starting from scratch and that everyone will have kind of a level playing field. But it's something we look at on a phase-by-phase basis, and we'll create the outlots or easements necessary to do that.
You mentioned $365,000 for the price point. Is that the max, and is that for all of the single-family homes?
No, that was actually the average or the target for, or I should say the median price that I got to backing into what the housing study said from that $78,000 a year salary that made up the 80 to 100% threshold. So we run, I run a real advanced pro forma where I've got houses that are entry level that are starting hopefully 260, 270, all the way up to potentially 500-600 plus. But the average right now that we're looking for throughout the entire development is approximately 365. Now there could be fluctuations down the road, but that's what I'm using as a benchmark today. So that's how that works. And again, the first phase will have a variety of price points as well that comes out of the gate. So mostly my best guess right now is 400 and below that, 270 to 400. But we still have a lot of hurdles to get to get to that price point. But that's our target right now.
Do you guys have a good idea of what the average lot size and square footage of these homes will be per tier?
Boy, for lot size, there's a very wide range. The carriage lane single family will range anywhere from 3,700 square feet all the way up to lots that'll be bigger than 10,000 square feet for the single family. So there's a big spectrum depending on where you are within the neighborhood. The attached product has some variability in it as well, in that when we start to talk about front-loaded twin homes, the combined parcels, so when we think of a building, which would actually be 2 lots, those have to flex water to accommodate garages and design of the architecture. So there's a pretty broad range in that as well. We do recognize that there's lot sizes that are different here, and that really is paired up with the ability to deliver attainability and deliver diversity of format and choices for folks as they're looking at home buying within the neighborhood. So depending where you are and what block, there's going to be a lot of variability, all of which is designed architecturally to work hand in hand, and it's something we've done in a bunch of our different neighborhoods throughout Dane County in terms of creating this mix and making sure that they work well amongst themselves and feel like one cohesive neighborhood at the end of the day.
Kristen?
Yeah, so what percentage of homes would you estimate are in that 260 to 270,000 starter?
Hoping to have that for tonight. I don't have it quite ready yet, that information, but my best guess is when we say the 88 twin, first of all, starter, I classify that as anything under 300,000 in today's market. That's just the reality of today's market. So, just doing the rough math, I would say that the twin homes plus another 50 or so, 25% to potentially 35% of the homes. And again, this is all rough math. I was hoping to be a little further along with the analytics, but I just don't have the numbers yet. So, and that's overall through the entire project. There will also be the downsizer, the Haven series, and there will be that product will also. There will be a version of that also starts under 300 as well, because that's a price point that we've seen there's a need for out here in that demographic, not just first-time buyers, but downsizers who are living off a fixed income of Social Security and 401k.
So what is the price range for those Haven homes if those are targeting seniors?
A little bit more than the twins. And again, I can't quite nail that down yet, but again, under 300, we want to start under 300 up to these ones. There are front load that are a little nicer and have front load garages and are bigger units that could exceed 400,000, depending on what, again, people select and what kind of countertops and everything else they want to build out in there.
And what's the smallest square foot home that you anticipate offering?
That's a good question.
No one ever asked that.
I don't think I have that. We're still designing a portfolio to fit on these right now. We have some, but we're trying to expand that book that we have right now. I want to say 1,500 square feet. And that's with basement, obviously. Yeah, so but that's, I'm sorry, that's unfinished basement, but 1,500.
And I'm gonna guess that everything has, I think I probably read it, but I don't remember, everything's got a 2-car garage. Or do we-
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then more questions. So the sledding hill, super important. That's the one thing I had starred too, because it's just such an important part of growing up in Waunakee is going to that sledding hill and hopefully, knock on wood, not breaking any bones while you're playing there. So if the multifamily home lot in the lower left-hand corner goes up for sale in 2021, which in some ways is like tomorrow, relatively speaking, do you have somebody that you're speaking with already? Do you sell it to a subsidiary of Viridian? Is it?
We have a partnership with several developers that we'll work with, but we're very selective on who we would allow or who we'd entertain to even work with. We check their body of work, what they've done around Dane County. And then also we have full architectural review rights on it as well. So we want it to match and blend in with what we're doing, our architectural schemes. And it's something that they will also pay into the HOA that helps subsidize the HOA for the entire development, because there's a lot of entry features and entry landscaping that'll be in front of the multifamily that we'll take care of. So no, it's something that we won't build, but we also will control to whom we sell that to.
And do you anticipate that being all market rate, or is it going to be blended with a mix of affordable or subsidized, or?
I would say it's more of a market rate. At this point, that's what I'm projecting, but that could also change down the road. Again, we're a year away, so I'm not. I'm only worried about what I could sell it for, and either one could pay that price. So that's really what it comes down to from a development standpoint.
Okay, and how many units would you anticipate would be on that 200 multifamily?
200.
And that's all rental, or is it
Yeah,
condo?
that would be rental.
It would all be rental.
Right.
Okay. And the last thing, that lower corner there, that where we've got, I think it's Division and Main Street, where we've got a stormwater retention pond. That ends up being one of the spots that if you're leaving town or coming town, you're at that stoplight. Visually, it has a lot of impact for it being, aside from the stoplight up by Culver's, kind of the point where you're really kind of absorbing what Waunakee is about. We've got in the kitty corner from that the Village Park, which is kind of, I'd like to think of it as our showpiece park. It's, in a lot of our pictures and whatnot. And when you develop that, I'd like to encourage you to look at some of kind of the more creative uses of stormwater retention ponds. The one I'm thinking of, and Ed's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about, it's at the corner of Whitney Way and Mineral Point. I think, was that your design? Yeah, that is like the world's most beautiful. It looks like an amphitheater, and visually it's stunning. It's really kind of a wonderful showpiece of what that could look like, and that's the corner of Science Park in Madison.
Right. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. So we're doing that in our community park because we have quite a bit of grade that drops down here. So we proposed that amphitheater that emulates what you did over there. To utilize that slope.
we are going to obviously landscape this, heavily landscape this, and create some kind of potential entry monument feature. It's going to be the entry to our neighborhood for the first 5 years or however have it until Main Street's built. So of course we want that to look nice. The Waunakee sign that's currently here that everybody's familiar with, we're planning on moving down here, and then also working with the community to come up with a design for that as well, because that's where it's kind of a high point down on Schumacher there. We want everybody to be able to see that. So yes, we're paying attention to that heavily used corner, and obviously it's a big marketing trail for us. We want it to look nice, just don't know what it's going to be quite yet. We got to come up with landscape plans.
An important little piece of it.
Obviously it is, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, that's all I had.
Joe?
An awful lot of stuff's been covered, but if I counted correctly, we're talking about 480 or so units, give or take. What does that turn out to for the density on here?
So it is 153 acres. And all in, we have 478, which we refer to it as single family. That includes the attached product and the single family individual lots. Let's see here. Then we have the 200. So we'll just do the math quick. Yep.
Do you have any other questions while they're calculating?
So the gross acreage is 4.4 dwelling units per acre across the entire property.
Okay. Any idea how that relates to other Viridian developments?
In terms of comparisons, it's hard because the parcels are different. But that's fairly consistent with some of our west side Madison neighborhoods. So if you went and looked at Thousand Oaks or Birchwood Point, I think you'd see a fairly comparable lot package. We certainly have all of these lot sizes in each of the neighborhoods, just a matter of the proportions. Grandview Commons on the east side of Madison is actually higher. That's closer to 6, and that's because it has the town center components with more multifamily in it. But again, if you look at the single family components, I think you'd find a very comparable mix. So if you go and look and get a chance to drive through some of the neighborhoods, you'll see these lots, lot widths and house combinations in almost all of the neighborhoods that we have, where we have both carriage and front load single family.
Okay. As far as our schools are currently concerned, I don't know if staff knows kind of what the load is at our elementary schools at the moment? Because as soon as this comes online, obviously, we're talking a decent number of kids that are.
We made some calls on that.
Yeah, I've talked with some folks over at MD Roffers, the planners that are working with the school district. They are updating their numbers. So we talked about some of the phasing and what was embedded in this concept. So that's, the dialogue has been open with the school district. Chris has met with the administration as well. So, we're closely working with them to make sure that this comes into their projections and as part of their long range plans.
Okay. And then the only other thing I've got is probably something for when we get to SIP, but as far as landscaping goes, I don't know what sort of requirements there are for trees and that sort of thing, but.
Yeah, besides looking at the concepts for the parks, which have been developed a little bit further, really the streetscape and the balance of the landscape is something that we will develop as we move into individual phases. So we look very closely at every single phase to make sure we have a landscape budget that creates the environment that both is consistent with the community and creates the opportunities for the marketing that Viridian wants to do, but also sets the tone and feel. And that's, trees are an important component of that. So it's something we'll work through as we move into the next phases.
Okay.
Can you elaborate a little bit on both the twin homes and the Haven twin homes? If I'm understanding correctly, the twins are primarily on the west side of what's going to be the future main street through the development?
Actually, they're distributed throughout. So the Haven series are the easiest. These are the blue series. So on the west side, there's a block here. This is a block of carriage Haven, and then this is a block of street access Haven. Then we have the lighter purple here and here would have the tuck under garages. So those are twin homes as well, but we're taking up some of the grade across the block, so a lower level garage would be used. And then this block, southern half of this block, and then this face along here are also the twin homes that are the market rate twin
The
homes.
last one was on the bottom there.
This set right here, yep.
So when you say 88 twins and 72 havens, those are 44 buildings?
44 buildings, that's correct, yes.
When you
We-
talk about the tuck-under garages, do you have an example of that, or?
Yeah, we don't have a picture with us. We've done this in our Autumn Lake neighborhood, in our Cardinal Glen neighborhood, and that's where we have situations like this where the grade is such, we try to transition our grade appropriately so that these homes would have front doors that would be at the street grade in front of them, and then we drop across the back where this carriage would be lower by 8 to 10 feet. That allows us to bring the garage underneath to a lower level garage. It also allows us to take some of the grade and keep this half of the block roughly flat so that the garage from the alley and then to the front door reduces the number of steps whenever possible. The other thing is that then takes that grade, moves the steps inside. We don't have to shovel them, those kind of choices for home buyers. But it is a case where we're using that to take the grade because it's going in this direction and this direction off the top of the hill.
Okay. The Haven then is more geared towards the demographic that's 50 and over?
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
marketed towards 55 plus.
Yep, and those are designed to be flat sites, again, trying to minimize the number of steps necessary to get in and out of the house
Ranch
or
style.
within the ranch plan itself.
Those steps.
So one of the questions that came up was about, and you could answer a little bit about how to make sure that those don't get bought up and, put into a rental.
Right.
If you're selling them initially, right, you're selling the dwelling initially, how, once it's been sold once, how are you going to maintain some control on that?
So we control the initial sale, but we also have a very strict covenants, codes, and restrictions that, and HOA docs that specifically pertain to the Haven series on top of the rest of the neighborhood. Within there, we've come up with a set of rental restrictions and guidelines that cover everything from, not having the short-term rentals. We are particularly careful or cautious not to turn these into the vacation homes by rent issue because we have more of a senior demographic, and we have protective verbiage in there that says, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's something that's tuned that there will be no or any rents, there are no rents allowed under 7 days, and then all rental, if a owner of a unit wants to rent out their unit, they have to get Veridian's permission first.
For the life of the property?
Yes, and that's deed restricted to the property. So those covenants will always transfer over with that property.
Have you used this concept in any other locations to this point?
Yes, we rolled it out about a year ago. So it's relatively new, but we're doing it on the west side in Birchwood Point if you want to go look at some of the product, and then also in Sun Prairie. And again, we're kind of learning more and more about who this buyer type is as we go, and we're modifying. So by the time we start building these, which will be, this time next year, we'll have even more data and be able to make adjustments to it. So.
Okay. Well, because it's interesting how you've integrated those different concepts together.
Yeah.
They're not just, hey, here's the Haven series and here's, you've kind of mixed them together. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes over the course of time.
It's working. Surprisingly, it's turned into a lot of downsizers who have grandkids or they want to be closer to the kids. And so, they might have a family member already living in the community or somewhere else in Waunakee, but now the kids are off to college. They want to sell the house and move into something more smaller so they can travel in the winter, and that's what this is targeted for. But they still like, the social aspect of meeting neighbors and kids and walking their dogs and everything else. So.
Okay. So the area where you have like the twin homes, and then there's the other, it'd be actually on the east side there, there's the other section of houses that you talked about being flatter. So those are going to be garage in the front, garage in the back. I'm assuming garage in the back with the alleyway cutting through.
Yeah, so each of the alley blocks, again, lessons learned over implementing these in the past 20 some odd years. All of this design is already the grading is somewhat embedded and baked in, so that's why you see the alleys start to run downslope, so we can step smaller grade changes between houses as opposed to front to back, which creates either steps outside the house or steps inside coming down to the garage. And so these are street accessed. They may have some opportunity for exposure on the backside, but they would be designed to have the garage and the front door close to the grade of the sidewalk in front. All of the alley blocks, with the exception of the tuck unders, are designed then to try to minimize the grade differential between the fronts and the backs. Again, to try to create as flat a site as possible. We've got a tolerance of a couple of feet grade change here or there, but we try to design that in so that, again, we're trying to minimize those steps that are both either inconvenience in the garage, where you have, 1 or 2 steps became 6 if you don't look closely, or having steps outside in front of the house that have to be maintained during the winter.
Utilities for this coming in off of Division, I'm assuming? Storm and sewer and water, everything coming in off of Division?
It varies. I mean, there's some
It varies.
interconnections for the water, and the sewer is mainly coming
Right,
from-
so sewer is actually accessed in 2 different locations, Brian. One is right here, which we'll bring up in this western portion of the site. We'll go to there. And then there's the interceptor that's across across Main Street here that will be extended up to the low point over here at Schumacher, and then that will feed the eastern half of the site. Water-wise, what we're proposing right now, and working through with Strand and the utilities, is that this will all be connected to the high-pressure system off the pump station up here in Lexington, which it's sized to be able to meet this site right here. Is just consideration for the future that needs to be thought of, that more lands to the north would have to expand that footprint of that, of what that can pump there right now.
Okay, because that was one of the comments, I think, early on, was something about capacity issues that you're
Yep.
working through right now, I take it?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. When you talk about Division Street, because I'm sorry, but I'm a proponent of putting that in, but I hear the comments about, you're gonna have basically a potential park area on either side. There's been some success by other developers with the roundabout, the little donuts or whatever. Maybe there's something that could be done through the design process at that point in time, and I'm not asking for any commitments, but, something to think about where you can create some calming mechanisms if, to reduce the speeds going up and over the hill. Bill probably wouldn't like that.
Something to slow down and cancel.
And then the other comment it would be is on the, well, I'd be interested to hear what the DOT says. I don't know, you had a lot of in-depth conversation on that yet, so, and how that might impact that corridor. Speed might be an issue as well. But with the mixed-use thing, again, probably down the line, but if you're trying to target that demographic of 50 and above, maybe there's something there that can help, not saying like, it's, the senior center has their senior center, but maybe there's something along those lines that might appeal in that section as part of that development, but that's not for me to decide, so that's all I got.
You good?
You're gonna tap utilities right to Schumacher?
Yes, yeah, we'll extend the utilities to our edge of our plat. And got plans for the water up there, and each of the waters will stub out to the side. And sewer's gonna be stubbed here at the low point that feeds up to the north in the future.
Thank you.
Which leaves me as the last. Chris and I had a nice meeting with Sue McDade and Todd about a week and a half ago. I was out of town last week, so I couldn't make the Parks meeting, so I wanted to get as much information, and Chris wanted to give me as much as possible. And there's already some changes from when we met, with I'm saying. One is where the dog park is. The trails actually weren't connecting to the dog park at that point. That is now showing that they are connected, which is great.
Yeah, the map actually just wasn't correct.
Okay.
We've always planned to have, we'd always had planned to put a path on the west side of Schumacher, because that's something we had heard from Kevin from day one.
Which is perfect. The water tower hill is gonna be, obviously, everybody's been talking about that tonight. It's a big issue. And I had talked about, maybe we're gonna curve that road a little bit. The issue, which didn't come out, but I think it's important for everybody to know, is where that ice pond is that they're talking about is a really wet area down there. So to try to put a road over there, not really feasible, to go do that over there. Correct, Chris, with what I'm saying?
I think this side, this is the wet areas over here. I think if we slide to the east, we might be okay. But we'd have to.
What I'm saying is kind of where we were gonna kind of come around, with a road that kind of went like this back, that we maybe follow the
Start
tree
here,
line.
somehow get to there, but hook somewhere.
Correct.
Well, yeah.
And it was, I think it was very clear from the parks, I wasn't at the meeting, but as well as myself, that hill needs to remain, a sledding hill.
Yeah.
And however we go about designing it, we're gonna get there to make sure that that stays. Now, if it's 6 years from now, More than likely, we may not have any of us here at that time, but, you know, that's.
Sledding hill will still be a key component of that whole project.
I would agree. So, you know, that's one thing. What are some things that scare you right now with this site? As a developer that you're looking at, what are the things that you can, it's gonna keep you up at night thinking about, oh, if this doesn't go right, we're not gonna be in a good spot, and maybe we're not gonna be able to do this. What are some things with the topography or anything? Have you thought any of those things?
There's, so obviously, there's a hill here, and we want to know what's in that hill. And could be stone in that hill. You know, we know there's stone in that hill, and thankfully we got a neighbor to the north who specializes in stone, so we know who to call for that. So yeah, that's something that we have an idea of how much we have to get out of there, but we budget accordingly. We build a big budget like this. It's a massive project. We don't ask for any TIF, and we try to stay as close to that budget as we can so we can deliver the price points that I'm throwing out there tonight. And so every day we get a little more confident that we're going to get there, but we just want to stay the course. And so besides the hill, and then some kind of major budget bust, which can happen at time to time. Just want to keep things moving forward here because we're also on a tight schedule. So.
Okay. And you're a for-profit company, correct?
We try to be.
In a perfect world, yeah.
So fair to say.
It is. It is, and that's something that's you know, I don't want to. It is something that I'm very impressed with that Veridian does. We probably could ratchet up, get an extra 10,000 for all those entry-level houses, but we don't because we have such a variety of product that we don't want to poach from ourselves, but we also wanted to establish this backlog of different buyer types. So we have a target profit margin that we just try to hit by backing into it with these certain price points, and we keep those price points where they're at. We don't try to take advantage of being the only builder that can achieve something at 300,000 or less. So.
Okay, so you don't really have concerns then for people that come in to buy the house at that price point. The rest of the market is dictating prices are actually here as opposed to where you're at. What transpires there when all of a sudden those buyers are all of a sudden figuring out, well, I could probably sell this house for 20,000, 40,000, 50,000 more based on what else is happening in that community?
Because it's a competitive advantage. They'll come in, let's say they buy a entry-level house at 280 and then they want to flip it for 310. Someone else can come in for 280 and pick out their own countertops, their own selections, and personalize that house. And so as long as we stay out in front, it really limits that, that buy and flip mentality that went haywire back in the early 2000s, but especially in a market like this, we control that process because everybody is excited and wants to personalize, add their own personal touch, and they could get something new for less than what somebody's trying to sell at resale for.
I think the other aspect of that is just controlled through the format, because you have very different housing types here that are tailored towards that attainable housing, whether it's attached or whether it's the carriage lane. What we've found in our neighborhoods is this kind of doing well in response to the markets and not depreciating, but not outstripping the market because it's a choice of having maybe the smaller yard space, but yet having the 3-bedroom house at a certain price point. Well, if you try to inflate it too much, suddenly you find, well, there's a house that maybe has a bigger yard or 4 bedrooms that's also in the neighborhood at the same age. And so there's kind of a throttling effect just on the format in that having all these different types of houses support kind of the choice that people will make in that second and third buyers could come into this neighborhood and have choices that have very different configurations and prices attached to them that are set right out of the gate. That kind of helps control some of that escalation in prices too.
Perfect. And when we spoke, I talked about that the homes are going to be quality homes. All the homes are quality homes. We're across all the demographics, and whether you're young, old, whatever, we want to have quality within our community. I think Waunakee is known for having a quality community across the board. This is not going to vary from that. Chris assured me of that in our meeting. Yeah. And so I'm very pleased with the plan as presented. I would have a question for Kurt and Peggy, if you guys are okay with me asking you a question. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Go ahead.
So, this is important land. I could tell, Kurt, when you stood up, that it's important to you. What was it that made you choose Viridian? Because you could have sold this to anybody, I'm assuming, at this point. And I hope it's not just gonna say money, but maybe that is the answer.
No.
That's it, but.
Actually, money was not the factor, and Viridian approached us. And like we did with most other proposals that came our direction, we said, okay, we can talk. We had some parameters that needed to be met, and one of them, the key component, was the farm mixed use portion. My mother lives in the home. We told the people at Viridian that we aren't going to displace mom. So as long as she's able to live in the home, that's a non-starter. So that was really the only hurdle that originally we needed to get across. Chris said we can deal with that. And so this is the concept that they came up with. Then basically,
And if I might also add, had a wonderful conversation about what would you envision or want, and the whole ag heritage. And they were already very responsive to the impression that that particular property has when you drive into town from the east. And we're already always sensitive to that too. And so preservation of that feel and the heritage. We didn't even say Heritage Hills. It's like, wow, okay, thank you. I mean, so that was part of it. I'll let you continue.
and so the first thing that Peggy and I did was go to all the Viridian developments in Dane County to get the feel, see what does Viridian do. We really didn't know anything about Viridian. So we felt that was the best way to, okay, is this something we are interested in, because we wanted to do something special with our property. And we drove through the neighborhoods and thought, this is comfortable, this is nice, this is quality, this is different than what Waunakee currently has. And what Waunakee currently has is great, but there's a need, obviously. And we could see that that need could be filled, and we thought, and the other thing that we really appreciate is the density. I know there's concerns out there about density, but we've prided ourselves on having productive land that is sustainable, and we wanted our final crop, which is going to be homes, to be very productive also and serve a need. And so it's just been very, very comforting working with them. I sleep very well at night, and actually prior to this, this was always on the back of my mind. How is this gonna transition? What are we gonna do? This was presented. It's been, I think it's a great fit, and I'm very comfortable and very pleased.
Thank you for sharing. As I said, I put you on the spot, and I appreciate your comments.
Thanks for asking.
They're very helpful, at least for me. I hope for you as well.
And then when it came to, I mean, as a former school board member president, when the comment came up about, what is it, well, even before anything was, I felt I owed it to have a meeting with Randy and Steve to say, and so Chris and I, met with them, even before I think the final contract was approved by all the property owners, because all those lines were different people who owned little pieces of it. Because I felt it was important to give them kind of a heads up also. This has always been a question, and what was nice, and they linked us up right away with Mark Roffers, who I know, he's the guy who does our numbers and everything, and it's like this. So that dialogue, I think, started as soon as there was a project that was able to be developed. So I thought that was important for me. And I also wanted to make sure that there is going to be a neighborhood where our starting teachers could afford to buy a home, because not all of our teachers can afford to buy a house in Waunakee. So.
Thank you.
Teach in the Catholic school, really many years.
So I'm gonna end, I have two final questions. One is for you, Kevin. I'm assuming you looked at all the street designs and everything, and from a plowing perspective, no concerns?
Correct.
Okay.
Meet our width requirements and meet our circulation requirements, and you don't see any cul-de-sacs, which is all good.
I just saw a couple curtain roads, tight turn stuff, but I assume that's okay. And then last year, other developments, do you see a different type of turnover in your developments than traditional other developers do? Is there a higher turnover, a lower turnover? Is that something you even keep track of? I don't know. I'm just curious. Because you have such a wide range, if it means that there's a lot more movement of people within or without.
Yeah, we do track very closely. We've take an example of Grandview Commons, which is a project now that's going on 18 years, something like that, in the ground. And so we've studied that repeatedly in my firm, separate from the Veridian end of things, as a planning exercise to try to just see how's it doing. And we see fairly typical turnover rates, which is anywhere from 5 to 7 year tenure in the homes, sometimes shorter, but on an average you get about to that. The interesting thing that we found is that they, as I said earlier, they've either held their own in terms of price, not depreciating, but not escalating greater than the general market, just holding pace, which has been kind of the goal. In that, the designs, we wanted that to happen. We didn't want to see these just, I guess, to use the cautionary tale of Middleton Hills, which would happen there, where you have small lots that I think the last ones went for $1 million. That was not our goal in the design of these. And so we have watched them very closely just to see how, look for signs of stress or signs of prosperity. And I think over the many years that some of these have been on the ground, we have seen them be desirable second, third, fourth, fifth time home buyers still looking at the neighborhood as a place they want to live, invest in, and raise families. So that's been encouraging to see.
Great. Thank you. With that, I would just share, I was at a conference about a month ago, maybe a month and a half, and we were talking about density, to your question, and in Middleton, they had taken some acre lots and split them into 5,000 square foot lots. And they were proud of the fact that they were able to put up a small home on a 5,000 square foot lot for $500,000 apiece. So my challenge to you is to never ever let that happen with them. So, okay, Kevin, Brian, you got another question?
Just to confirm again, the only rental space here is the multifamily potential apartment complex. That's the only rentals on the whole site.
Everything else is for sale product.
That's fine.
And bit of a process type question. Are we at any sort of risk approving the GDP without the traffic study?
It's a condition of approval, so I think we're probably there. Leave it at that. We want to spend a little bit talking about the multifamily, and Brian's going to touch on that as part of the approval process.
So, yeah, and the first thing was to kind of talk about process. So what's before you tonight is the preliminary plat and the general development plan. As you see in the packet, staff is recommending approval with certain conditions. Then the preliminary plat, the general development plan, the annexation ordinance, and the annexation agreement would all go before the village board at one of the meetings in January as a package. And then at some point in time later in the future, determined by the developer, then we would be coming back with final plat, development agreement, and SIP for certain portions of their development. So we're kind of in the first step of the process right now. I will say that, so if you look, starting on page 50 of your packet, that is the general development plan, and it is this document. And I know I had some conversations with Jason about this. Typically, as the village attorney, I do not like these documents. I prefer the ones that have been prepared in the past by Mr. Lawton for Kilkenny and that we used for Woodland Crest. Credit to Veridian and to Vanderwall for this document. It is actually a zoning document. Lots of time you see these and they got about 2 pages of zoning and about 50 pages of, hey, this is our product. This provides great detail on the zoning, so I think it does look good. We do want to focus on, I would say, two issues on, or identify two things for the multifamily. And that if you look at page 82 of your packet, we have Heritage Hills District 7 and that's the multifamily lot that I think is in the, that Brad had identified before. And then, just to clarify, across the road there is Heritage Hills District 8, which is the mixed-use center. And if you go to page 84 of your packet, there would potentially be multifamily there. Now, when it comes to multifamily, what we have done recently, and this happened with Kilkenny Farms West, it happened with Arboretum Village, and it happened with Woodland Crest. We adopted general development plans, but we did not approve any multifamily within those general development plans because we're in the process of working on a housing study. I think Todd Schmidt, the village administrator, is intending that that housing study go to the Community Development Authority for recommendations to the village board. I think that we've been told, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, that it is important for the developer, in this case, from a financing standpoint, to actually have the two lots that potentially would allow for multifamily to be part of this general development plan. And the discussion that we had with them at the staff level is willing to have a discussion at the plan commission level where we would include these multifamily lots in the general development plan, but then as part of the annexation agreements, have an agreement that they would not be able to move on to the SIP stage until the village has essentially completed its process as part of the housing study and then determined how it wants to go forward with multifamily. The other aspect of that discussion is we talked about deed restrictions on the property that would identify the number of units that could be there, because we have an ordinance in place right now that says that we will not rezone land to PUD unless it's going to have a 75-25% split on single family and multifamily, and so we would have to make sure that's the case. Now, I think at a staff level, for the reasons that they identified, we were open to doing that in this case. In other words, including the multifamily in the GDP. If the Plan Commission is in favor of that, and if the village board is in favor of that, I do think that we need to go back, in particular to the Kilkenny West developments and the Arboretum Village development, because both of those have a significant single family as well as a multifamily component, and make the similar offer to that developer so that we are consistent in how we are handling multifamily development within a large development that also includes a lot of single family. The general development plan that includes the Hy-Vee project is a little bit different because that has a multifamily component anticipated, but does not have a single family component. So I think we would have to, at a staff level, kind of revisit that. But I want to raise that it is part of this GDP to have it included as multifamily, but we also want to be consistent with how we want to treat people. And so I think the two options for the Plan Commission are, one, to pull the multifamily out of the GDP like we did in Kilkenny Farms West and Arboretum Village, or to proceed allowing it to be in there but have, as part of the annexation agreements, language that says, look, it may be rezoned to GDP now, but it's not going to go into SIP until we get done with our housing study, or language similar to what we have agreed to with Arboretum Village and Kilkenny Farms West, and then offer that same type of treatment to those particular developments in order to be fair. And so that's the first comment on the multifamily. The second comment is just, if you look at page 84 of your packet. So this relates to the farm mixed use center, and we just want to raise this as a discussion point. One of the things about this general development plan that's been proposed, it's very detailed with zoning, and it's very good. What we have here, and what they have here is okay, because basically they're saying, look, we're going to address things like setbacks and building heights and things of that nature at the SIP stage. But they also identify potential uses, and there's a lot of potential uses for the mixed use. And the question becomes, do you want, it's retail, it's office, it's all permitted uses within our C1D commercial district, it's all conditional uses within our C1D commercial district. Do you want to have some type of limitation, a reasonable limitation on the number of mixed uses that can occur within this lot, similar to how we addressed the first Kilkenny Commons commercial development? That's a discussion, something I think for the planning commission to consider. Those are kind of the two major issues on the multifamily.
Okay. So, do you wanna take them one at a time?
Sure, yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I mean, I think that makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so why don't you spill it out then?
Well, I think on the first one, with respect to including the multifamily in the GDC, but then having in the annexation agreement, the SIP, it can't move forward at the SCP stage until the village board says it can, and we have a deed restriction on number of units so that we comply with our 75-25% split. I think staff is okay with that. We just want to make sure that if you're okay with that, our anticipation would be to go to the Kilkenny West and to the Arboretum Village developments and essentially make the same offer to them so that we're consistent. And then we still have to kind of give consideration to what to do with the Hy-Vee area.
Okay, yeah, I think it's important for us to stay consistent, whatever we do. Brian, go ahead.
What's the 75-25 split?
75%, if you have 75% has to be single family, which includes duplexes, and then 25% multifamily. Well, we're gonna have to.
This it, I'm sorry, can I speak? Yeah.
Go ahead.
678 total units, 200, my back of the envelope math says that's 29% multifamily. My math's correct?
Yeah, we'd have to work through that issue. It's because it has to hit the 75-25 split, or else it can't get rezoned based on our existing ordinance.
Other comments? I believe we need to stay consistent. No matter what. So, go ahead.
Can I ask, I wasn't here for the Kilkenny decision, so going back to make this offer to the developer for Kilkenny, what does that mean in terms of?
Well, so we have an annexation agreement regarding the Kilkenny Farms West right now that says that we would not rezone any land as part of the PUD that would result in multifamily. And so, as we sit here today, right now, we don't have an application for a GDP that would include multifamily. But because of that language that's in the annexation agreement, I think that we would have to have a discussion with them and say, basically, look, if you do bring forward some type of rezone to PUD, or I think it's PUD or R4 or R5, if you are consistent with the with the existing village ordinance, we would look at making that change. Again, if it's to PUD, then we would be able to treat that development the exact same that you would be treating this one. If it's to R4 or R5, we'd have to have additional discussions with them. But to this point, my understanding is it is the desire of the developer to do PUD zoning. Then with respect to Arboretum Village, we did recently, within the last year, rezone or approve a GDP. The lot that was going to be the multifamily lot, we pulled out of that GDP for the reasons that we wanted to get done with the housing study. Now we would want to have a discussion with them about does it make sense to insert that into the GDP, but then have an agreement similar like we would propose with Viridian, where it can't move on to the SIP stage until the village is ready.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, good. So are we in agreement? Do we need to make motions on this, or?
No, I think when you look at what Kevin had prepared for the staff recommendation, we would just add that multifamily discussion as part of all other staff comments resolved to the satisfaction of the village engineer. Now the
I mentioned add multifamily language for Brian's discussion at the planning commission. And I think we should add it as a bullet number. It's a big one.
Okay, so that's a fifth bullet that would be added to the four that are already in the packet.
Okay.
And then I think the next one is more just. What are your thoughts? I mean, when you look at page 84 of your packet and you look at the potential uses for the farm lot, are you okay with that? You know, that's a lot of different uses, or would you want to see it? I mean, restaurant certainly seems to make sense. Multifamily is certainly consistent with what they've proposed to date. Senior housing is consistent. Institutional, I think, is consistent. I think where you really get into the broad potential uses is you have retail uses, you have office uses, and then you have all permitted and conditional uses within the C1D commercial district. Do you want to see staff work with the developer to narrow the number of permitted uses that could go in there, especially when you start thinking about retail?
Two questions I would have is, number one, multifamily housing is listed here as a use, and we've already just identified that there's gonna be a potential issue with the 2575, and you turn around and add a multifamily use to this, potentially, as a potential use. That creates even more of a challenge. The other thing is if they come up with some plans for this site, wouldn't they have to come back?
They would have to come back with an SIP, but within the general development plan, if you've identified something as a permitted use, then there's really no basis, and then all of a sudden they come forward with that as a permitted use as part of the SIP, the fact that you don't like that use would not form a basis to deny the SIP.
Brad, any comments?
I'm starting to see the point here, you know, the last three, you know, permitted use consists with CID, downtown commercial district, you're not really excluding much when you look at, you know, potential uses. And is that, you know, this is the time to speak up if it's gonna happen. You know, it's a pristine farm and it's definitely a showpiece, and I think they wanna keep it that way as well. But I'm sure they'd be working close with Viridian family to hold tight to their conversation in their family land.
And we need to look at,
I mean, basically what we're looking for right now, I think, is, I mean, again, this does have to go back up to the village board. And no matter what your recommendation is, it is a village board decision. I'll also tell you that even though we kind of had greater specificity of uses, especially with the Kilkenny Farms Commons commercial development, there still are a lot of uses. I mean, our goal here, or at least my goal in raising this, is not to really put handcuffs on the developer as to what can go there. It's just that right now it is very, very broad in what can go there. And are you comfortable with that? The happy medium is to try to sit down with them and come up with some uses that, and certainly some of them are definitely going to be commercial and they will be retail. But do all retail uses and all office uses work in this spot for you?
And I don't know if I'd be too concerned about it. I think it's in their right mind to market their property and make it as family friendly and fit to the surroundings. You know, if you're thinking it's gonna be, I would be surprised if it's gonna go against their grain of a family-driven subdivision, but I can see your concern, but.
And I want to raise it because this is the time, like I think you said before, this is the time to address it.
Go ahead.
Offer some insight? Sure. I guess I would, just to speak to how that use list came together. One is, as I think, as Kurt alluded to, we see this being somewhat delayed in terms of implementation because of the agreements in place that allow the continued use of that piece of this site into the foreseeable future. What we were trying to do was be as transparent as possible about the potential, and we worded it potential that way on purpose, just to make sure that we're not saying these are proposed uses. These are just things that would be consistent with what we've done in other mixed-use developments throughout the Dane County area. The last three items, we were trying to then tie it back to a list that you've adopted of uses to try to kind of give a comparable fabric and character, which would be more like the downtown. We see this as potentially incorporating not just one retail user, but multiple retail users that would work in concert with each other. In terms of, could it be mixed use? Could there be multifamily? We recognize the discussion about the housing study and how that get implemented. That will certainly impact whether that's a unit. That's why we didn't say, hey, this is 100 units, this is any particular count. We just said, that's going to have to be determined when this moves forward. But in terms of the uses within it, we were just trying to be as descriptive as possible about the kind of components that would be compatible in a mixed-use district like this. And that's really what led to that listing, because that's one of the places in your ordinances where you have a fairly detailed list by use that's tied to a format. So we were just trying to not leave it open-ended and say retail. Well, what is retail? We were trying to tie it to a list of uses that you've already had in your books, in this case, looking toward the downtown district as a good guide.
Anything we need to make sure I'm assuming all our traditional exclusions would be included in here.
Well, I mean, based on that statement, one way to approach it is to cross out within, you have a couple of options. One, if this is something that's going to be done in the future, you could leave it as ag. And it doesn't it does not get rezoned at this point. The expectation that it gets rezoned in the future and it's gonna be mixed use. The other is to leave the lion's share of the list they have here, but cross out retail uses and cross out, or to say, look, the list is gonna be multifamily housing, senior independent assisted living, institutional worship, restaurants, urban farming, and then just say the permitted and conditional uses within the C1D zoning district. It's just, you know, when you have the 4 bullets, and again, I'm not trying to advocate for one way or the other, I just want to point out to you how wide the use is right now. When you have, you know, there's a bullet that says retail uses, there's a bullet that says office uses. That's very broad. And so one way to do that is to strike both of those and say, look, we're going to have uses that are consistent with our C1D zoning district. As Mr. Munson said, we do have a list there, and the thought process may be, hey, if it's appropriate for our C1D, it's going to be appropriate out there.
So tell me or tell us, I should say, what's the difference between if we leave it ag? What's the good of that or the bad of that?
Well, the if you leave it ag, then for it to be essentially rezoned for the uses that are anticipated, when they have a better idea of how it's going to be used, then it would have to get incorporated into the GDP at the mixed use level. And so the benefit is you're not taking action now and you're waiting until there's a better understanding of how the property is going to be used.
What makes that problematic, though, and I think what they're trying to get at is we're trying to put people on notice. We're trying to be as transparent as they can. So if they have a residential development that's going in around it, you're making the expectation clear. These are some potential uses and expected potential uses that are going to be around you. So don't come to a meeting a couple of years from now and raise issues. If you were told, if it's ag, well, then somebody could argue that, well, you didn't give me any expectation of what was going to happen.
Thank you, I wanted that to be clear to everybody. Why we want to do that. So, okay, so,
Can I offer one more comment on that?
not really.
All right.
Go ahead. Quiet all night. Go ahead.
Just from my perspective, I don't have any problem with the list of uses. I think flexibility on use is a fine thing. If anything, I would like to see a little bit more, even at the GDP stage, but ultimately care and concern about the form that this site takes, that development takes. So, you know, we've heard about a desire to either use some of the existing buildings or have new buildings reflect the character of the farmstead buildings that are there. I think that's a good thing. I'd like to see that in the GDP. I'd also like to see, I think that that the eventual site design not feature a parking field in the front visible from Q. That parking that occur be concealed to some extent from Q, again, because I think that would dramatically alter that character from Q, so, or from 19, excuse me. So from my perspective, I would like to see a little bit more on the issue of form. Totally cool with the flexibility on use.
Okay. I kind of agree with that. So I'm glad I let you speak. The other thing, and we didn't point it out, the main park, is what the visual feature is what you were going for, Chris, correct? I mean, the people will be able to see from Main Street, they'll be able to see that park as they look up. So it's gonna be very visual as you look there. So regardless of what's gonna be in the mixed part, you'll be able to see that up there too as a feature. So I'm okay with it, but you guys, we have to make this as a group, so. Comments? Headaches? Tired? All the above? Chris, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think? Limit it or leave it open where it's at right now?
I agree with Jason.
Okay? Kristen?
I agree with Jason too. Yeah.
Joe?
I agree with Jason.
All right, well, that's 4 of us, so we could, no. Brian?
I'm leaning that way, but I keep reading this list, like, you know, it rattles off a bunch of uses, and then it kind of has the catch-all permitted use C1D. I don't have that list memorized. Is there something in that list that's not actually being picked up up above? I mean, what, is there some, you know,
I think most of the uses and conditional uses in C1D are probably caught with the bullet points that are above.
So I hate lists that then end the list with sort of a generic catch-all. So that's my hesitance.
Are you still thinking we'll leave you there?
I think I'm.
Brian?
I got nothing.
Are you for, or are you okay
Do I
with?
have to vote
Okay.
one way now?
Well, we're trying to come up with a consensus. I mean, there's
I
already
think we
four,
got
but,
consensus.
so you just don't want to do anything. Brad?
I agree with Brian.
Which one?
We'll do a consensus.
Well, it's staying right now, so.
It's staying.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's staying at this point. So,
Yeah.
okay, what else do we need
That's
to
enough.
do?
I think that's enough on that particular issue. I think we solved the multifamily. They may wanna say something. I think we have a couple choices on the multifamily right now. We've had the past pattern that we've done for development and Tierney's. I think you stick with that model. Hey, you leave it alone until we get through the housing study. Or if we go with this new model, and you want to do 75-25 within your development with a deed restriction, we can do that with this development, then we got to go back with the other ones and offer them the same fairness issue. So I think that's the choice with there, and maybe they want to weigh in on that. I don't know if we've got a clear read on what the developer wants, given those two choices.
So the intention we've been talking about here is a 75-25 that's out there is eventually either going to get upheld or modified. But we have to keep moving forward, and we fully embrace what the subcommittee comes up with and works as they work through this process. But from an appraisal standpoint, we just need to get through something that classifies this as future potential use that's more than just ag, because it's a multifamily site. Now, whether that's in line with the 75-25, because we are bringing so much single family on, just like Don does. Don brings single family on as well, with a multifamily component to it, or maybe that's at a higher ratio because of what the subcommittee ultimately determines come this summer. But the whole point of this is just to move it forward through the preliminary plat, put the deed restriction on it, and so it'll sit there in place as we progress and maybe final plat our first phase, but that restriction will still be there. We can't move any further along with it. But from an appraisal standpoint, it'll show up as potential multifamily, which allows a borrowing capacity that's vastly different for land that's earmarked for multifamily versus just ag. So that's why this is an important hurdle. It still restricts everything and protects everything. It was just a creative solution that we worked with the village staff to try and approach this and come up with something so we could keep moving forward here while protecting the village's best interests.
Okay, so that, I think, helped us right there. Would you agree with what we want to do? Yeah, stay consistent.
Yeah, I mean, what I
It's
heard.
a village board decision, so
Yeah.
I think this,
Yeah.
probably would like some feedback from the planning commission on the 75-25, and I know it's something that's gonna be discussed heavily over the next couple of months, and maybe it's simple as, the 75-25, it is now, unless modified by this, subcommittee going forward, because I think that's the potential. Rather than trying to lock them in now, they're semi-locked in now unless it changes in the future. That's the best compromise I can come up with in my head at 8:30 at night.
It's consistent. It's consistent too, so, okay,
It's consistent as long as we give it to the
Yeah.
other folks. Yeah.
right,
That's a benchmark.
yes.
Good.
So, okay,
Yeah. So I think
Is that right?
I think we have.
yes, everybody good with that? Yes, yes? You don't have to nod, Brian, we got 6 already, all right. So, I'm kidding, of course, I'm kidding.
So I think all that's left to do is, I think the recommended motion will be motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat And the general development plan, we're not doing anything on the SIP because we need a final plat for the SIP, so we're not there yet. So motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat and general development plan to the village board, subject to points 1 through 4 as identified in the staff recommendation, plus point 5, which is multifamily language per the discussion at the plan commission level.
So moved.
Motion by Kristen Runge,
Second.
second by Brian Wallace. Okay, any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you guys very much for all your information. Thank you, everybody in the crowd, for your participation on this. And I would just add one thing quick, is that the committee on this will be starting their work in January, hopefully. We're gonna go through the process at our next meeting, so we should hopefully get something in the next couple months then to help with this. Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we've got update on Waunakee Westport, so discuss and take action on specific SIP for Quick Trip. We already did that, so I think we're good there. Hospital referral, we already said we're going to the referral over it, so one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Joe Zitzelberger to adjourn, second by Kristen Runge. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.